Splatoon 3 is the third entry in the Splatoon series, the second Splatoon game on the Nintendo Switch, and Nintendo's most ambitious and main online multiplayer title. It won 2022's Best Multiplayer Title over games like Call of Duty, Modern Warfare 2, Overwatch 2, and Multiverses. Splatoon 3 is one of my favorite online multiplayer games, rivaling the enjoyment I had on Fortnite before that game completely lost its identity. It even rivals the enjoyment I had on Black Ops 3 and even Black Ops 2, my two favorite first-person shooter games of all time. Splatoon 3 objectively is one of the most unique games out there and is, in my opinion, one of the best games in the shooter genre due to the execution of its unique concept. The game's overall potential, however, is unfortunately botched by Nintendo, their inexperience with managing online multiplayer titles, and their unwillingness to listen to the community and to learn from their previous mistakes. I do want to warn you of two things before we begin this video. One, it will sound like I don't like Splatoon 3 or maybe resent the game because you are about to listen to me discuss its issues for over an hour. I'll let this be known now that I not only don't dislike Splatoon 3, but I probably like it more than most people who own the game. The amount of time that I have dedicated to this franchise and trying to get better at the game as a whole is something that new viewers probably won't be able to appreciate because they're new viewers. However, I've been playing this franchise for the past 7 years and have stuck with it through its ups and its downs. I think Splatoon 3 is a net positive experience and is overall a great game that I recommend to any Switch owner. The second thing that I'll warn you of is that I probably do not hold all the same opinions as you do. I might not hammer all the points that you want me to hammer or do it in a manner which satisfies you. I might even come off as too aggressive on some points. In any case, there's little to nothing I can do about it because we're two different people that hold different perspectives and opinions. It's worth noting that I do swear in my videos, but if you can bear with me and capture the essence of what I'm saying, it can lead to a pretty productive time, all things considered that you're watching a YouTube video about a game. But anyways, let's get into it. But before we do, I would like to shout out this video's sponsor. This video is sponsored by
these nuts. Got him!
In my previous video, Many Flaws of Splatoon 2, I discussed the topic of the video in the format of all the game modes one at a time. So we're starting off with Splatoon 3's story mode, which is all around a good experience. I don't have too many, if not any, problems with the story mode. Splatoon 2's story mode kept the same essence of Splatoon 1's story mode, but just made it a tiny bit more expansive and appropriate for the time frame of that game's release. However, it failed to reformat much of anything. You still go from section to section, uncovering translucent kettles, enter said level until you clear all the kettles to unlock the boss kettle. After completing all of the sections, you fight DJ Octavio again, and then you beat the game. Splatoon 3's format is a bit more interactive, putting you in a much more open and elevated world called Alterna, with each section being much bigger and more interactive than those in the previous games. You have a fundamental gameplay gimmick using a salmonid named Little Buddy that you can use as a sub-weapon to clear areas of fuzz, which will kill you upon physical contact. You can uncover areas of the section you are in by having Little Buddy eat blobs of fuzz, requiring varying amounts of power eggs you gain from inside levels and for completing levels. Similar to the Octo expansion from Splatoon 2, some levels will require a payment of power eggs before taking on the level. Amidst each section are numerous optional levels, collectibles, paths for you to embark on. There are a total of 70 levels in the story mode, each offering pretty cool concepts for the player to engage with. No level felt bad or overtly annoying, and all the levels felt like a slight step up from those found in the previous Splatoon games. There's even a new upgrade system you can engage with by collecting sardiniums and upgrade points and choosing a specific skill to unlock. These skills range from ink saver to ninja squid to a weapon upgrade to sensors to ink resistance, small fry damage, etc, etc. The boss fights in this game were not only cool because the multiplayer idols were the bosses, but because they were unique. Splatoon 2 reused the Octo Stamp boss from Splatoon 1, and the Octo expansion from Splatoon 2 literally reused the same bosses from the main game. The concept of the boss fights were mostly the same. Overpaint the arena as oversized sentient, non-sentient objects does an attack, showing a weak spot after said attack for the player to take advantage of. In this game, however, however, we have completely new concepts for the boss fights. Paying homage to DJ Octavio, in a twist, we fight him in the very beginning of our journey, and he, spoilers, I gave you your warning, fight alongside us in the final boss fight against Mr. Grizz. For those of you who don't know, Mr. Grizz is the ominous creature from Splatoon 2 Salmon Run, and before this was the most mysterious character in the entire franchise. When fighting fire, I think Nintendo purposefully baited us into thinking we would fight the Octostamp a third time, but it's actually used in a completely different manner. Shiver's boss fight was my personal favorite, but Big Man's boss fight was probably the coolest. And then they side with us in the end. We get an amazing boss fight at the end of the game, and if you went out of the way to complete all of the levels like I did, you get a pretty challenging final level. All in all, this story mode is a wonderful experience and is worth picking up a copy of Splatoon 3 for alone. It addresses most of the issues with the previous story modes by giving us a new fundamental environment to explore, interactivity within that environment, player agency, a cool new gameplay gimmick, expansive levels, good boss fights, a good progression system, unlockables that carry over to multiplayer, and more. If you wanted to go out of your way to name flaws, then yeah, this story could have been better or it could have been a bit longer, but that's what you're doing. Going out of your way. In my opinion, in order to find an issue with the story mode, you would have to nitpick issues. All in all, the story mode is a good experience. I certainly don't find myself going back to it since I already beat all the levels, but I had fun with what I did play. Multiplayer. Here's where the video lives up to its title. I'll start by saying that multiplayer is the main attraction of Splatoon, and thus I have different standards from it than I do the story mode, for example. From Splatoon 2 to Splatoon 3, a handful of quality of life changes have been made, some of which surprised me. The input delay is negligible, unlike in Splatoon 3, which I had to get used to after some time, especially coming from playing PC games. We can skip the news for the first time in 7 years. We can go into recon mode on any mode at any time and play for up to a whole hour instead of just 5 minutes. You can take in-game screenshots. You can change your lobby music. You can sit in a training section while loading into games. You can see which sub, special, as well as gear ability that each enemy is using via the map, and a handful of other things. Splatoon 3 took the liberty of giving us updates via seasons and giving us catalogs for each season. A catalog is like a free battle pass with up to 100 levels with rewards for each level. I do not have an issue with this as a concept, unlike other people who hate quote-unquote modern gaming and not giving us a full game at launch. Just to clarify my position, since you hear me mocking the sentiment, adding content into the game does not mean the launch version of the game was incomplete. That's like making renovations to your house after you buy it, then claiming that the house pre-renovating was not yet a house. It's obviously different when games come out unfinished and then become finished via updates post-launch. Companies in this industry absolutely do that, and it rightfully frustrates said player base. Nintendo is not one of those companies, and Splatoon 3 is not one of those games. One thing that I do not like about the catalog are the rewards, or the inconsistent quality of them as time went on. In Season 1, which set the standard for what to expect out of a catalog, we got things like banners, titles, emotes, food and drink tickets, exclusive gear, locker items, and table turf cards. I will not be covering that game mode in this video, by the way. There's absolutely no way. This to me was acceptable as long as the gear got better and looked more exclusive than the ones bought in the in-game shop, and as long as the banners got cooler and the emotes got better. Chill Season, or Season 2, sort of appeased me with its catalog. We got cool new emotes, full sets of gear, cool new banners, except this time I could have sworn that I saw some of the exclusive gear in the catalog return from Splatoon 2. I mean, that's just lazy. This was something I took a mental note of, but wasn't cause for criticism just yet. The Season 2 or Chill Season outfits looked a little more distinct, but not as exclusive or unique as I wanted them to look. The Season 3 or Fresh Season catalog gave me what I was looking for in terms of gear looking exclusive. All except 2 banners were completely randomized, a little weird, but nothing to complain about, and the emotes were pretty good. Now, getting into Season 4, or the Sizzle season, we get a peak catalog, which unfortunately I did not play enough of the season to get a lot of the rewards. I was too busy with school, my summer job, and I played a lot of Geometry Dash in my free time. So you would think Season 5's catalog would be excellent. If you did happen to think that, then you would be pitifully mistaken. These niggas over at Nintendo literally gave us recolored gear that was already in Splatoon 3 and Splatoon 2. Not only that, but some of the rewards are literally from old catalogs and the Splatoon 3 shop. Nintendo, what the fuck are you doing? The level 100 catalog reward for Season 5 is literally the same level 100 reward from Season 1. Nintendo was even too lazy to call the new season a new name. No, it's just Drizzle Season 2023. And Season 1 is no longer just Drizzle Season, but Drizzle Season 2022. And that name doesn't even make any sense. Drizzle season? Bitch, what's drizzling? It concerns me going forward. Will we get returning items in Chill Season 2023 from Chill Season 2022? Well, since I'm just now finishing the script in Chill Season 2023, I can confirm that yes, we literally already have half of the damn rewards from this quote-unquote new catalog already. Nintendo, you are not slick. Just because you named the 2 seasons the same thing doesn't give you the excuse to return items from said season. Again, that's lazy. The catalog was your idea, so not only are you implementing things that no one asked for, but you're not being faithful to an inclusion completely incepted by you. But it took us an entire year to come up with that criticism. What about day 1 complaints? A lot of people complained about the maps. Here's where I will share my criticism of the game's maps. It gets pretty subjective in this section of the video, as I do think the maps are horrendous, but for my own reasons, because I do think the community is dragging the issues of maps to a certain extent. Immediately after the game's launch, the community tore this game a new asshole for having the worst lineup of maps the series has seen. Now, I won't pretend that a lot of the maps aren't objectively bad, because if I were to say that, it would just be untrue, but what a lot of Splatoon YouTubers fail to do by looking at this game from a design, objective, and competitive perspective is taking into account enjoyability. Yes, a map can be objectively poor for some weapons, desired movement options, certain abilities, etc. However, I would take this lineup of maps all day, any day, over Splatoon 2's. Last time I checked, Splatoon 3 doesn't have Kelp Dome, Schellendorf Institute, Moray Towers, Camp Triggerfish, Walleye Warehouse, and Wahoo World, all stacked into one game. And there are a lot of stages that were either just mid, like Skipper Pavilion, Snapper Canal, Bobby Arena, Albacore Hotel, and Piranha Pit. Then there were some that were pushing it, like Port Mackerel, Arowana Mall, and Black Belly Skate Park. Now, I do think that the design of the maps needs to be drastically improved, and we'll get into that in just a second. But to continue the point I was making, the maps, although bad, don't preclude you from having a good time. In the case of ProChara's video, I definitely agree with what was being said, but one point that was being made in the beginning of that video was that essentially the maps restrict your playstyle for picking the wrong weapon.
You're going to feel like you have to actually fight no matter what, whether you're a support player or you're trying to flank or you're an elite who's trying to hang back or anything like that, you're just going to have to fight. What I don't like is that in Splatoon 3, deathmatch is the only thing I can do with a Tetra. You used to have different playstyles that were open to you depending on the map and the enemy team's comp and your own comp and all that sort of stuff. You used to be able to strategize around this sort of stuff. But now, if you're playing Tetra, you're playing quick respawn. There is no alternative. You can't use a mobility-based playstyle, you can't use a slaying kind of playstyle. You are going to go 9 and 20, whether you like it or not.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man? That nigga's tripping.
Yeah, I'm not buying that when ProChara dropped a video around the same time clowning X-Rank, showing him shitting on everybody in the highest rank in the game with a Splatana Stamper, a weapon that is relatively difficult to get good with. A lot of great points were brought up in that video, which I'm not trying to invalidate. However, I'm not buying the argument that Tetra Dualies, for example, can't be used without quick respawn while showing how easy the highest rank in the game is to you in another video. I do think in comp, you can't play Tetra without quick respawn, but not in regular matches. There's no way we're complaining about the highest rank threshold being too easy because you're a competitive player, but when the game puts you against players you can't mindlessly shit on, you're gonna complain about being restricted to using gear abilities, which is synergistic with your weapon in order to prevail. That's literally what good competition is supposed to do. And because of Splatoon 3's horrific performance-based matchmaking, I'd argue only the best, maybe top 2% of players would be forced into using a niche setup in order to prevail, and therefore I don't think it's a map issue, but a matchmaking and lack of coordinated enemy comp issue. But we'll also get into all of those topics much later in this video. My point in bringing this up is that you can still play most of the weapons the way you want to play them. I don't think the idea that you cannot is appropriate to perpetuate to the community. The maps, although in a poor state, don't prevent you from doing that. This holds true with the exception of Barella because it's a pathetic weapon. Another point that is commonly made about the maps is that they promote stally gameplay and that the game slows down after a certain point when a team tries to complete the objective. I do agree with this, absolutely. But I have to say, and I might be a little crazy, or maybe I've just been on a different planet, but this literally isn't anything new. First off, why is it that we're now criticizing the maps for being 3-laned and without great flank options when Splatoon 2 literally had maps like Walleye Warehouse, Port Mackerel, and Moray Towers? And most of the Splatoon 2 maps that weren't 3-laned and actually had flank routes that required the player to travel ridiculous and unoptimal paths completely out of the way of the action. These maps included Snapper Canal, Gobi Arena, New Albacore, Blackbelly Skate Park, Arowana Mall, Camp Triggerfish, and Kelp Dome. And I'm sorry, but if you got flanked in Anchovy games, you're either Helen Keller, Stevie Wonder, or stupid as shit. Splatoon 3's maps are also criticized due to having to either skip a choke point or to use specials to eradicate the enemy team. The strategy of having to either skip a choke point or build up specials to overpower the enemy team is literally the same thing we did in Splatoon 2. With the flank routes in Splatoon 2 being so out of the way of the objective, you would oftentimes create a disadvantage for your team trying to take said flank route before being able to exploit the enemy team by taking it. Or sneaking up on the enemy team wasn't something that was easily ascertained because the flanks would often be covered with so much enemy ink that you would reveal yourself to them before being able to do anything meaningful. This is especially the case with Splatoon 2's bare bones movement compared to Splatoon 3's. I would argue having no flank routes is better than shitty flank routes. At least you have constant action, and the team that is actually better is more likely to get the upper hand. But at the same time, I'll prefer good flank routes rather than no flank routes. So let's get into the issues of the maps. In my personal opinion, much of the issues with the maps are that they are one-sided. As stated in the ProChar video, when leaving your spawn means you no longer have quick access to retreat back into it, problems arise. It promotes that stally gameplay we were talking about, and depending on the weapon one is using, they might not even feel comfortable leaving their safe area, as it's now a much bigger commitment to do so. Opening up both spawns to enemy teams opens the game up. The consequence of allowing the enemy team easier access to the opposing team's spawn isn't as high in Splatoon 3 as it is in Splatoon 2, as we now spawn in the air, and choose where we land. Maps also need to have several flank routes open to both teams that lead either into the enemy base or the enemy side of mid. As I just listed the downsides of Splatoon 2's maps and their design, we can look at aspects about those same maps which would make Splatoon 3's gameplay more bearable. The Reef had two side sections which led into the back of the enemy team's comfort area or their main area of operation. At the same time, there was a higher area which enemies could use to oversee that main area of operation. If the enemy team wanted to push that higher area, it would take a greater level of commitment, and there was still enough room for the opposing team to rid the pushing enemies, unlike Humpback Pump Track Rainmaker, where if a team was really pushing you in your spawn, you pretty much lost the game. Manta Maria has a main flank which brings a team past their spawn into the far side of mid, which allows for recovery when an enemy team is pushing into the spawn. Starfish main stage had a grate in mid which wrapped around to the back of the enemy's comfort section in mid. A perfect flank option. As for Splatoon 3, Crab Leg Capital is a perfect example of how a map should feel. There are several options to enter the enemy spawn, although it's a risk versus reward, as getting into the enemy spawn requires vertical painting, swimming, and walking across grates. Quickly going through all the maps, we'll start with Scorch Gorge. Scorch Gorge is the main map we look at when criticizing the maps in this game. It might be very objectively bad, especially with all the empty room up front before you're even allowed to get to the objective, but I will have to say that it plays decently for Clan Blitz. I'm not a huge fan of Rainmaker or tower control on this map, and I think that we could all agree that Splat Zones on this map is one of the worst experiences you can have while playing this video game. The zones are entirely too big, and the structure in the middle of the map being there is beyond horrible. It's definitely worth skipping rotation over. Eeltail Alley is fine. I like playing this map again when we aren't playing Splat Zones, but it's not nearly as horrific as Scorch Gorge Splat Zones. It is worth noting, however, that being pushed on this map by a good team is one of the most oppressive experiences in the game. If the mid lane were wider or shorter, it probably wouldn't be much of an issue. Hagglefish Market is an example of an objectively decent map that feels not so great to play on. You might love this map, but I personally can't stand it. It sucks for me because this is a map I thought I was going to love pre-release, but it's just not my cup of tea. Taking the flank routes leaves you at a disadvantage in the process, and is a very predictable action because you can only do it conveniently from the left side, on most game modes that is. Pushing the enemy's top area is extremely awkward unless you do it with the full extent of your team. Undertow Spillway plays pretty nicely despite its awkward map design. It gives me Black Belly Skate Park vibes and Splat Zones, but my main problem is that there is no way for the enemy to flank those giant glass structures unless they push deep into the enemy spawn, being overtly obvious in your game plan and communicating it to the enemy team. Mincemeat Metalworks is one of those maps that is not only objectively bad, but also not fun to play on. Splat Zones is bearable, but every other game mode misses the mark. The map's area of operation is too narrow, and the map in and of itself isn't wide enough. If those large pillars were more accessible to either team, gameplay would feel a lot better. And this is one of those maps where if an enemy team is pressuring you correctly, there isn't too much you can do without the use of specials. This isn't my least favorite map to play on, but would be one I wouldn't miss if the code from it just magically disappeared. Hammerhead Bridge is one of the 3 reworked Splatoon 1 maps that arrived on the game at launch. It's more open than it was in Splatoon 1, and it works for how we've grown to play the game in a more competitive manner. But for Splat Zones, being the only game mode where the enemy doesn't have to take the game into your spawn, the long way to the objective becomes a hindrance. Despite this, I believe there are good paths for both offense and defense. The only complaint is that the far sides of the maps aren't open for flanking, leading to awkward kipper pushes where people will hold their gun up while holding down the trigger, hoping some ink falls onto an enemy. I do like the block leading into the enemy's comfort zone, however, it's too close to the main choke point in my opinion. Despite what some people say, I think it's a decent map that is fun to play on. Museum di Alfonsino is another map that is objectively decent and is actually enjoyable with the exception of tower control and sometimes zones. For tower control, it's like the wide horizontal midsection of the map being so accessible to the enemy team and the objective being the absolute unprotected centerpiece makes playing the objective that much harder. The one time I feel the complaints about the snipers in this game being overpowered, it's because I played tower control or zones on this map. Bro, I can see an E-leader, but why are the splatter scopes and chargers able to reach you when you're behind the mid platform when they're just sitting in the comfort of their base? If the block on the side that is available during Clan Blitz was always available, it would be that much more fun to play. Mahi Mahi Resort is a map a lot of people were disappointed in. It was a fan favorite in Splatoon 1, and in this game, it's entirely too small. Now, I personally don't mind playing this map, but it is irrefutable that more space should have been given to us as the player, and that a lot of deaths are a direct result of the map size. This is a map I enjoy playing on due to the flank options always being available, the tower, clam basket, and rainmaker being far enough into the enemy base where the enemy can still defend and the opposing team still has pushing options. To be honest, this map gives a lot of what the community yearns for in map design, except for its abysmally small size. Inkblot Art Academy is a good map. I don't care what much of anyone has to say, to be honest. It was an objectively good map to play on in Splatoon 2, and it is here as well. The only thing that I can concede is the block being present in Clan Blitz needing to be present in all game modes in order to open up gameplay, similar to Museum. I do think this map could be reworked for Rainmaker, however, because the aforementioned fix I just stated wouldn't really apply for that game mode. Surgeon Shipyard is another good map from Splatoon 2 that made its way into Splatoon 3 upon launch. It plays well, and it's fun to play on. I think the grates from the far sides of the spawn should make their way all the way to mid, just outside the reach of the bottom side areas that are connected to mid via the inclines. Mako Mart, in my opinion, was objectively the best map in Splatoon 2, and not much has changed in terms of my opinion on it in this game. The flanks are open for the enemy team on both sides in all modes, including tower control if you factor in the tower. However, these flanks require good movement and forces one to take advantage of the enemy team not paying attention to you. The only issue I have is that the flanks on the far left of the spawn doesn't properly bring you into mid, but rather the narrow corner of the left flank. Wahoo World is just ass. It was ass in Splatoon 2 and it's ass here in Splatoon 3. Maybe if it weren't so large and the bottom of the map was always open to either team and the floor in the bottom of mid didn't rotate, then it wouldn't be so bad. It's not a map that I despise playing, unless it's Splat Zones or Clan Blitz, but you'll always feel that extra effort to get to the objective every time you are put back into your spawn and want to play either side of the map. Brine Water Springs is a decently enjoyable map to play on. I like the difference in its lighting compared to the broad daylight of all the other maps in this entire series, seemingly. The problem I can concede with this map is, one, there isn't a flank route, and two, it's more special dependent than any other map in this game other than Mincemeat Metalworks. This is especially the case in Splat Zones. Brine Water is an example of a map that may not be objectively great, but is still enjoyable to play on. I think I can stop connotating that with "in my opinion," as we have been over enough maps that aren't fun to play on. That way, I can always say, well, at least it's more fun to play on than Wahoo World or Mincemeat, which I don't think anyone sober is going to contest. What you're probably going to contest, however, is my opinion on Flounder Heights. Now, the general opinion on this map baffles me. Now, it might be high or just downright stupid or maybe both of the above, but how the fuck do you complain about how awful Splatoon 3 maps are and then turn around and praise this map? No, the spawn area is not good. If you aren't getting pushed, maybe it's okay, but if the enemy team is going on offense, there's almost nothing you can do. Your spawn area requires you to either swim up this big-ass incline after going through a bit of flat terrain, or go to the narrow sides of the map, paint up, and swim up the walls. Mind you, if you are getting pushed, the enemy team not only has the height advantage on you, but an overtly overpowered positioning advantage, as now everything is directly in their line of sight. That ride rail isn't doing shit either. Try that when playing tower control or playing against a decent E-leader. You'll see what happens. In my experience, the only time you survive a push into your spawn on this map is if the enemy team is worse than your team and flukes a push, or of course, specials. Secondly, Flounder's flank options have the same problem that I described Splatoon 2's flank options having. It's so much of a struggle to even get there, and by the time you do, you either put your team at a disadvantage and the game is continuing elsewhere, or the enemy team has the time to pick you off because they also had the time to see what you were doing. Even kids who are already in the middle and try to flank to the other side of the apartment get found out like 9 out of 10 times they try it. Furthermore, if you do decide to go into the enemy spawn, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage because of the height disparity. And finally, the area of operation in Flounder Heights are 2 narrow platforms connected by a grid you're forced to walk on. You could swim around it, of course, so that's one bonus. This map isn't bad or unplayable, but it's nowhere near as good as what a lot of people in the community paint it out to be. Pun intended. I'll be the first one to tell you that Eeltail, Hagglefish, Undertow, Hammerhead, Museum, Inkblot, Sturgeon, and Mako Mart are either just objectively better maps or are more fun to play on, in my opinion. I think this was a fan favorite in Splatoon 1 because of the chaos that game had, and the change in pace in terms of map interactivity with a lot of verticality compared to the other maps in Splatoon 1. But this is a different game, and I don't think it fits that well into Splatoon 3 relative to how it did in Splatoon 1. I only say this because a lot of people carry over their positive feelings about the map from Splatoon 1 into this game, as some say Flounder Heights was the best map in Splatoon 1 and the best map in Splatoon 3. Oh my gosh. Please, let's not act like that is remotely the case for Splatoon 3, because this is a mid-tier map at best.
That crossover was mean as hell.
Get off that nigga dick, bro. What is you doing?
What? No, you right. I was dick riding.
That's what I'm saying, bro. You gotta calm down with that shit.
Yeah, my fault.
Umami Ruins. This map was released in Season 3, but was shown before the launch of the game. This leads me to believe that Nintendo didn't actually listen to us when we stated the changes we wanted in map design. Instead, Umami inadvertently became a good map which addressed most of the problems we had with the maps in this game. Umami Ruins is a map with 3 different routes for getting into mid, and mid itself being pretty operational for either team, and the enemy base being noticeably easier to invade than other maps, although you cannot do it sneakily, which I think is a plus as it gives defense a more fair shot at addressing the intrusion. I will say that it never feels comfortable playing mid, and if it were slightly more open, then this map could be S tier easily, but for now, it is absolutely objectively better than most, if not all, of the maps released before it. And there is even a stark difference in gameplay experience. That's not to say that this is my favorite map, because it's not, but it's definitely a step up from most in the game. Manta Maria was a good map from Splatoon 2 that made its way here in Splatoon 3. In my opinion, it would be hard to mess this map up, and the only way that it could be improved, like for Mako Mart, is if the block that is there in Clan Blitz was present in all the game modes. I mean, that would literally make this map perfect. This map is known for its famous flank route that wraps around the enemy's high platform, and it gives defense a good chance for recovery unless you're playing tower control, because entering the enemy spawn, just like in Flounder Heights, puts the pushing player at a disadvantage due to the incredible difference in height. But at the same time, offense can exploit the far side of the enemy spawn, which, like Umami Ruins, gives defense and offense a fair chance in ascertaining their goal of either winning the game or getting rid of the pressuring team. Barnacle and Dime basically does what Umami Ruins does, but slightly worse, making it still a decent map. Mid is pretty operational, and with the exception of tower control, getting into the enemy spawn is relatively easy. I think this one wall should be inkable at the side of mid in order to utilize more Squid Surge and to exploit the enemy team skillfully like you could in Arowana Mall in Splatoon 2. Humpback Pump Track is a Splatoon 2 map that returned in Splatoon 3, but it's also something you can whisper into your girl's ear, and if you tell her that's what you want to do to her, she'll start blushing. I mean, Nintendo, you know I'm crafty. You really got to be careful of what names you give your maps. Returning from Splatoon 2, and is even better here in Splatoon 3 with the different specials and movement options, is Humpback Pump Track. It plays sort of the same, and there isn't too much room to exploit the enemy's base outside of Rainmaker, which, by the way, just like in Splatoon 2, is a horrible experience for the defending team. The enemy's base is like the forbidden area for an enemy's team, and getting into it requires going through that long stretch of map. However, mid is pretty flankable due to the slight changes in elevation. My only issue with this map is that getting into the left side of the enemy spawn gets you caught most of the time you do it, and how the curves in mid messes up the alignment of your shots. Other than that, this map is pretty solid. Crab Leg Capital is the map introduced in Season 5 that took into account the community's backlash because objectively, this is probably the best map in the game. Again, not my favorite, as it could be improved in many ways. Like, why the fuck does the size of the map dip so low and with so little space? But there is a huge change in how the game opens up and feels while playing this map than even my favorites like Mako Mark. The sides of the map leading into the right side of the enemy base are inkable on all sides by both teams. And to make the journey of venturing into the enemy base not too easy, the sides are filled with grates connected by small inkable platforms, giving attentive players time to contest a sneaking enemy trying to flank. Mid is flankable on both sides, and the left side of the map is also able to be flanked via a block. Shapeshift Cargo is what Barnacle and Dime is to Umami Ruins to Crab Leg Capital. It does the same thing but slightly worse, which still makes it good. Both sides of the map are able to open up to the enemy base with the same long stretch of grates connected by small platforms. Mid is also flankable by two different means. This map isn't one of my favorites, but plays noticeably better than most in the game. Robo Ramen is a map that I like. I think it's great for splat zones, probably the best in the game for splat zones, and not bad for the other modes. It includes everything we wanted out of Splatoon 3 maps, so it's good that Nintendo is listening to us to some degree. Bluefin Depot doesn't play excellently, just like in Splatoon 1. The two sides of the map being horizontal to one another makes gameplay feel unnatural. It's harder for a team to collectively ascertain a certain goal, whether it be completing the objective or setting up defense, as the team's efforts are easily divided due to the map design. I guess there are worse maps out there, but this map is not my favorite by any stretch of the imagination. Marlin Airport. This is a map that you get when the developers put all the antidotes for map criticism down on paper. This map is better than most because of its options. There are a ton of offensive options, and for every offensive option, there's a defensive option. When pushing, however, the problem lies in what to actually do, similar to Bluefin Depot. Since there are so many options, teams are often divided when executing offense, which doesn't get played efficiently because for every offensive position, the map hands it an easy defensive position. I think the map should either reward risky offensive moves with good flank routes, like Crab Leg Capital and Mako Mart, or should make defense on a high ground that offense can also access, like Inkblot Art Academy on some modes, Hammerhead Bridge, etc. This is what makes good game flow. But there's a reason why I can get knocked out twice on this map without the enemy team making it past 30 on tower control. This is also the only map that came out this season. I'll give it a slight pass because we had the DLC come out just a few days prior, but this is evidence of another point that I'm going to bring up later on in the video. So overall, do the maps need to be reworked for optimal experience? Yes. Are the maps in a bad state? I would say that they're in a state in which they need to be updated. I would not go as far as to say that the maps are in a state where it holds back the enjoyment of the game, but they are in a state where if they were to be updated, then the enjoyment of the game would increase. Honestly, there are only 3 maps that actively impede your gameplay experience, and those are Mincemeat, Mahi Mahi, and Wahoo World. I'd say Scorch Gorge too, but the only version of Scorch Gorge that is unbearable is Splat Zone. Should I also say Eel Tail is another one of those maps because zones and only zones is bad on it? No, I'm not going to do that, so there's that point. And finally, I would also not go as far as to say you can't play certain weapons in the way in which you want to play them because of the maps. That's just a little extreme in my opinion. Another flaw of Splatoon 3 that was here at launch was the gear system. But before we even get into that, you know I'm going to bring up Ninja Squid. Now, my most popular Splatoon 3 video thus far is me criticizing Ninja Squid to be the bane of Splatoon 3. I then got gaslit by the comment section of my video. Okay, I'm just kidding. There were some decent points brought up when I chose to ignore the "just pay attention, bro" comments. Oh my gosh. Nah, Ninja Squid's in a good place. You didn't see him either? Yeah, Ninja Squid's in a great place. Nah, just pay attention. And I will admit, I did change my perspective on the issue a bit. I no longer think that Ninja Squid is as detestable as I made it out to be, or even as much of an imbalance to the game. However, there are a few points that I think are worth mentioning. I still think Ninja Squid is a shortcut, and I think the counter requires much more effort to execute than what Ninja Squid warrants, being an accessible ability that anybody can use. When you feel compelled to write me a step-by-step guide on how to counter Ninja Squid, and it ends up being a 3-paragraph long comment, I mean, one can only suspect I think the problem with Ninja Squid is that it allows people to believe they are benefiting the team via them having good movement and making calculated decisions, when in reality, they're being carried by a gear ability rather than accumulating good movement through trial and error experience, and thus building their skill naturally. I've seen a lot of skillful players use Ninja Squid, like Kiver, Keo, and Brock, just to name a few pros that I've encountered while they were using Ninja Squid. However, for the vast majority of the games I see enemies using Ninja Squid, they're going to get kills where the only factor that played into them obtaining said kill is Ninja Squid. And then they get to put their team in favorable positions that they would never be able to dream of without the ability. Whether you loathe or love Ninja Squid, you have to admit that it's disproportionately overpowered in relation to a gear ability. Ninja Squid is activated every time you press ZL instead of being activated conditionally like most other gear abilities. Furthermore, multiple gear abilities would have to be stacked on one another just to compound its effect and make it useful enough to compare to Ninja Squid. Like sure, Inksaver Main also lasts all game, but you need at least 6 or 7 of them stacked to begin to assert it being as overpowered. Ninja Squid requires way too much extra focus on the game for being a gear ability. And lastly, its prevalence and pervasiveness exposes how much the map design needs to be improved. I've stated that Ninja Squid is worse in this game than in the previous titles, and the majority of the community has stated that the maps are worse in this game than in previous titles. It's not a coincidence that the two are correlated, because the poor map design incentivizes the use of Ninja Squid, which is why I'm seeing it more than ever. I already explained why I think Ninja Squid is overpowered, but to combat the idea that it isn't overused, I'd ask the following. Which is it? Are the maps not poorly designed and Ninja Squid is balanced? Or are the maps poorly designed and Ninja Squid isn't balanced? You can't have it both ways, saying the maps are broken but then jumping to defend Ninja Squid. But enough on that. Now getting into the actual gear system. Like perks to Call of Duty or attachments on a gun, ability chunks are items that are feasible to play without, but are something that is encouraged to use. It makes gameplay a whole lot more convenient. This is especially the case when one would like to play in a certain manner, or in a manner which is synergistic with a weapon/weapon roll. Running swim speed up for splatlings, Inksaver Main for dynamos, swim speed up for shooters. The thing is that there are a lot of different ability chunks that are offered, 44 to be exact. 11 out of the 44 abilities are found on a set kind of gear or clothing item, and the other 33 are completely randomized.
Is this nigga serious? Come on now, dog. Come on, man. Boy, no way, bro. Boy, no way, bro.
For a 1-star piece of clothing, or a clothing item that can only give the player one gear ability, it costs 2000 XP. If you upgrade a 1-star piece of clothing, it will cost 6000 XP for the second ability chunk. Then, if you upgrade it again, it'll cost 10,000 XP for the third ability chunk. For a 2-star clothing item, or a clothing item that will give the player 2 gear abilities, the first gear chunk costs 3000 XP, the second costs 7000 XP, and if upgraded, the third will cost 11,000 XP. For a 3-star clothing item, which is, I'm sure you could guess at this point, a clothing item that gives you the maximum, or all 3 gear abilities. The first ability costs 4000 XP, the second one costs 8000 XP, and the third costs 12,000 XP. In summary, a fully upgraded 1-star piece of clothing costs 18,000 XP to unlock 3 ability chunks. A fully upgraded 2-star piece of clothing costs 21,000 XP for 3 ability chunks. And a 3-star piece of clothing costs 24,000 XP for 3 ability chunks. Just as a side note, you would think that the 3-star clothing would cost less XP to get all 3 ability chunks as a compensation for the item literally costing more to obtain in the first place, but I guess not. Anyways, the previously mentioned information means that on average, just 3 ability chunks cost an average of 21,000 XP. How often would you expect to come across 21,000 XP? Well, let's say that you earn 2,500 XP every win, which is more than generous in my opinion. And let's say you win 70% of your matches, which in this performance-based matchmaking environment means you are a very good player. Again, I'm being generous, just so when you see the amount of time this takes, you'll be that much more baffled. That means you have to win 9 games, or play 11 win matches, giving your insane win-loss ratio. However, with a much more realistic 50-50 or 1 win-loss ratio, it'll take you playing 18 games, but we're still being charitable to this video game. So how long would it take to play 11 games? Well, about 55 minutes to an hour when factoring in queue time. So it takes an hour to get 3 gear abilities in this video game.
Of course, assuming you're very good. An hour to get 3 out of 16 completely random abilities. This means you have an 18.75% chance in getting the exact gear ability you want for a specific chunk.
Now, I won't try to be disingenuous. Some gear items have a slightly higher chance of you getting a certain item. For instance, a crack-on gear item has a higher probability of rolling a swim speed up gear chunk. However, I'm not going to factor this in as it would require way too many calculations than I already did. I would say, for the peace of mind of some that think I'm exaggerating how awful this system is, that the percent chance increase in a particular gear item getting a specific gear ability usually guarantees that one of the slots gets that specific ability. There have been times where, for instance, I use a piece of crack-on branded gear and I don't get any swim speed up. Only 2 times in this game and 4 times in my 7 years of playing Splatoon have I gotten 3 of the same ability chunks on one piece of gear randomly. I think you're starting to get the picture. Okay, where was I? Oh yeah, so if you think that the numbers aren't working in your favor, which as a veteran Splatoon player, I can tell you they aren't, you have the option of putting your own ability chunks on a piece of gear that you own. But of course, it has to cost something, right? Nothing in this world is free. So being able to put one specific kind of ability chunk onto one piece of gear means you have to spend 10 ability chunks. If you want to put another of the same kind of gear ability onto said gear, it'll cost 20. And if you want to have a pure gear set, which means 3 of the same abilities on one piece of gear, then it'll cost 30 gear chunks of that kind, totaling 60 gear chunks. Going off of our numbers, let's assume that you get all of the same ability chunks every time you roll. For example, you get swim speed up on all of your rolls. Since we have a number for how much XP it takes to put a single piece of gear into the reserves, we'll use that number. We come to an average of 11,000 XP to do so, because the actual amount of XP varies depending on the star rating of your gear. 11,000 XP after acquiring 21,000 XP. The average we came up with for acquiring 3 gear abilities on a specific gear item. For those of you who don't know, once you get all 3 of your gear abilities on a specific gear item and continue to wear that gear item in game, the XP you gain contributes to unlocking another completely random gear chunk and putting it into your reserves so that you can spend the 10, 20, or 30 ability chunks to manually put them onto another piece of gear.
So getting back on track, the amount of XP to put the swim speed in your reserves is 11,000 XP for each individual chunk. If you want to have an item with pure swim speed, meaning all 3 slots are filled with swim speed, you'll have to earn 681,000 XP. Now, based on our charitable number of taking 1 hour to get 21,000 XP, it would take you a total of 32 hours to get 60 of the same chunk. That's if you get the same chunk every time you rolled. You have a 1 in 8 fucking probability of getting the same kind of gear chunk. So doing the math with the added probability in play, you will have to have 10,896,000 or 518 hours to guarantee making 60 of the same chunks for every ability type.
Now this obviously doesn't seem accurate, right? This is because these are the numbers Nintendo saw and said,
一体誰がそんなくだらないことをしたい気分になるんだ。これをもう少し簡単にする必要があります。
and thus you will receive at least 10 out of all gear abilities as a reward for each catalog, and bundles of 3 of each ability chunk as a reward for completing Salmon Run shifts and gambling with the Shellout machine. Nintendo also made it so that the probability of getting a specific gear chunk is raised on a specific brand of clothing, as we already acknowledged. There are drink tickets, which increases your chance of getting a specific ability on a roll. Spike can scrub your gear and save the gear that was previously on your clothing or gear item for a price of 20,000 coins, might I add, and can re-roll your gear, which does the same thing to already existing gear abilities in terms of putting them into the reserves. Then for the cheap price of 5 sea snails, you can earn rolls on a fully upgraded piece of gear 10% faster. And for an additional 10 sea snails, you can earn your rolls on the same piece of gear 20% faster. And finally, empirically, once you get a specific ability chunk on a piece of gear, there's about a 50-50 chance that you will get that same ability chunk on that same item again. For instance, I get swim speed up as my first ability on a piece of crack on shoes. And then my second ability might be bomb defense up. And then my third ability has a 50-50 chance of being either swim speed up, bomb defense up, or neither. Again, this is empirical and I can't actually verify this. If none of these little things were in place, however, the 518 hours to guarantee getting 60 of the same gear chunks would be a reality. And remember, that 518 hours is the number you get while working at the most efficient rate humanly possible. It doesn't take into account the randomness, the 18.75% chance you have of getting a specific kind of chunk. Now, to give you a realistic estimate of how often you can get these ability chunks, I have played this game for over 400 hours and I was able to construct 5 pure gear items. That means for every 80 hours of my life, or a little more than 3 full days of doing nothing except playing this video game, I would earn enough ability chunks to construct 1 pure gear item out of the hundreds that I own. If you, for some reason, need any more convincing that the gear system sucks elephant, then nothing will ever convince you. I can see you disagreeing with a lot of points in this video, but if you can't agree with the point that the gear system is ass, then I don't think I can convince you that the sun is hot. The problem that this causes is that us as the player are forced to go to painstaking measures of overplaying this video game in order to at least adequately utilize a pretty streamlined feature of the game. Furthermore, it makes wearing the gear you actually want to wear either extremely inconvenient for those who dedicate a lot of time into this game and impossible for those who don't. What if I want to dress like Chris Breezy, but instead I have to dress like little fucking Wayne because the gear I just so happen to have success with when paired together makes me look like ASAP Rocky at the Met Gala? I literally can't run my pure quick super jump gear without wearing a motherfucking pasta strainer on the top of my head. You literally can't make this up. And for a game which orients itself so deeply with gear, tying it heavily into the in-game prestige of the characters, flaunting it in the trailers of the game, making the primary incentive for buying amiibos, granting players exclusive gear, and putting full gear sets in the catalog, it's insane that this system is in place to restrict our actual agency with the gear. Did they add some things to make it better than Splatoon 2's gear system? Of course. But what was added is so ineffective that it just seems as bad as Splatoon 2's gear system. Nintendo, band-aids don't really heal gaping bullet wounds. Another flaw of Splatoon 3's multiplayer that I think is worth pointing out is the matchmaking system. Unfortunately, the system for matchmaking is a large step back from not only what was once in Splatoon, but in general. Now, I know you're tired of me bringing up Call of Duty in a Splatoon 3 video, but just hear me out. You guys remember Call of Duty Cold War? And remember seeing how the devs got away with skill-based matchmaking being in the game? And then they proceeded to implement all of these other features which negatively affected the enjoyment of their game. That's because Call of Duty Cold War was actually just a test run of how much a community will tolerate being spit on and yet continue to play a video game anyways. Nintendo decided to look at one of the core features that Cold War implemented and said,
これはおそらくゲームに実装できる最も馬鹿げたものの一つですが、このゲームを同時にプレイしているのは12人だけであるかのように動作するため、ゲームの9時間を短縮する必要があります。
The feature that I'm hinting at is called performance-based matchmaking. The one fundamental matchmaking system that is worse than skill-based matchmaking. Now, what is this and how do I know that this is in Splatoon 3? Performance-based matchmaking is what it sounds like. Matchmaking based on performance. So if you do good in one game, you will fight better players in the next. How do I know that this is in Splatoon 3? Well, even though there's no concrete evidence of any particular matchmaking system being present in Splatoon 3 ranked, anyone can figure out which matchmaking system there is by conducting a test which thankfully includes only 2 steps. Step 1 is to visit an eye doctor and have them give you an eye test to ensure you aren't legally blind, And then step 2 is to just play Splatoon 3. Now to qualify this, I first noticed this at the end of Season 4. I barely played the game that season due to life being in the way and me playing Geometry Dash primarily. I jumped back on after a long hiatus and was about S+1, and I won a couple of games. And then in the subsequent match, I play not one top 500 player, not two top 500 players, but a third one, all on the enemy team. And the best part about it was that the third top 500 player was actually a top 10 pro player. What in God's green, white, and blue earth did I do to make the game think matching me with 3 people who don't have lives or responsibilities was a good idea? And I'm joking about that last part, but you get the point. Just recently, I did an experiment of my own, which you are more than welcome to watch on the Wave Clan channel. I was also S+1 at the time, and I went crazy during my first 2 matches. Literally knocked the enemy team out. Given this is the second rank beyond S rank, and in Splatoon 2, I was 2200 X rank. This is literally how an S+1 match should feel to me. Easy as fuck. However, the very next game, I'm placed against a top 10 player. So we lose the game, and the game after that was mad easy because I just got shit on. I obviously win this next game, and so the game ups the difficulty a little bit. The game after that, I fight people who I have to struggle to win against, aka lower to mid-tier X rankers. We got knocked out, but it was a fairly close match. Definitely a bit more than what being an S+1 warrants, though. And I don't know, maybe because the last game was a close game, it gives me the same kind of lobby for the next game, but we lost again, and there goes the end of my series. Just recently, I again won 2 S+ series matches, and then what do you know? I fought another top 10 player. Now, you won't be fighting against old top 10 or top 500 players every single time you do good in Anarchy series, but it isn't uncommon. This is in my case at least. But when I look at other players, Kiver for example, a longtime professional player and Splatoon champion, a top 10 best player in the game in my opinion, and should be in everybody's top 20, someone who makes top 500 players look like casuals, would lose an Anarchy series at the immaculate rank of S+13. This isn't the exact clip that I was talking about. I actually couldn't find it, but this is even better. This is Kiver losing in S+1 at the beginning of the season. Now you might be like, oh, it's the beginning of the season. Everybody comes down from their rank. Of course he's gonna be liable to fight better players. My thing is, if everybody over the rank of S+10 is coming down, why is S+1? S+1, why is that the point where a professional player, not just any professional player, one of the best professional players, has to stay on his toes?
Where's my team? What the fuck? From that, whatever. And you kind of have to adapt yourself to every possibilities, honestly.
I'm not saying being a pro player precludes you from losing a series. That's stupid. But I did notice that he would get matched with these Japanese tryhards who are good enough to beat no lives with a pro player on their team. At S+13, I'll give you even more anecdotal experiences. I gave my friend the Switch controller one time and let him play Splatoon 3 for the first time ever. It was during the Zelda Splatfest right before Tears of the Kingdom came out. He obviously did horrible for 3 games, getting 1 kill for the entire 3 games that he did play and over 20 deaths in the same time span. Then he gave me the controller so I could play, and I dropped 18 kills with a blaster I haven't used since Season 1. Then in my next match, I had to actually try against the enemy team. In the January Splatfest, I literally fought a top 500 player with other try-hard enemies on the enemy team. After my first win in the entire Splatfest, I was literally still a family fan. This was my second game in the entire Splatfest, and I matched against a top 500 player. Finally, I remember going for a rank up battle in Season 3 from S to get to S+, and I was matched against DNA Sin, another top 10 pro player, in S rank! There's no way. Are you with me? Bruh. That was all explosion. Bro, this team is getting down. Can't even ink this shit. That was so stupid. Bro, this team, bro, that's like, I don't give a single if we're fighting a pro player. I don't. Y'all need to get that shit together. These kept dying left and right. And the crazy thing is, like, why am I fighting pro players when I'm in S+1? That's crazy. It is what it is, though. Like, look. Right, oh, you can't really see. Yeah, look, S+1. Of course, these are all outliers, but most of the time I will go up against people with higher credentials than I have whenever I do well in a series. And because of my experience with the game, I can handle these players and win a good portion of the time. And if that wasn't the case, I would have made this video a whole lot sooner. However, what if it wasn't the case that I was as decent as I am? At the time of me writing this part of the script, I have a total of 1,666 wins. I've played this game since the day of release and for a total of 400 hours. Tell me why I'm matched up against kids who have these stickers. To get one of these stickers requires you to get 1,800 wins in a single game mode or with a certain special.
Stop the cap. Stop the cap right now.
So to have one of these means you have more wins in one game mode than all the wins I have combined in all 4 game modes, or arguably even worse, more wins while using a certain weapon kit than wins I have with all the weapon types I use combined. And to have 2 of those means you have more than double my total efforts. From a credential standpoint, why would the game think this is appropriate?
Next, we have the golden special weapon badges. I currently have 4 golden special badges at the time of recording, and each one has taken about 100 to 120 hours worth of using the special.
Is this nigga serious?
To make things worse though, private battle wins don't count, and neither do wins where you don't actually use your special.
Now you're probably thinking, having those stickers doesn't automatically make the person good, and to that I say, yeah, maybe, but it's definitely suggestive of skill. Not every prestige master in Call of Duty was a top tier player, but it definitely points towards experience. The stickers aren't the common denominator of whether or not one is good at the video game. But you don't get 1,800 to 3,200 wins within a year by being trash. And I'm consistently matched up with these people. Yes, I did say it isn't a problem in terms of my skill level, but it is a problem for my game level. I'm currently in S+3, so why am I fighting these players consistently? How do I go from being able to drop 30 kills in S rank and then desperately struggling to rank up in S+0. This matchmaking environment is absolutely ridiculous and makes the actual ranking system abstract and nigh pointless. The reason why this is able to be ascertained is because once you get to S+, you're pooled against players who are in S+0 to S+50, the maximum S+ rank. So those top 500 and top 10 players who wanted to play Anarchy because it had a better rotation than X rank are liable to join your lobby despite you just graduating from S rank. Absolutely ridiculous. And I've been hearing that S rank, A rank, B rank, and C rank are all pooled together. Boy, I don't even want to do my research to find out if this is true or not, because it'll do nothing except make me mad at something that will never change. If this is the case, whoever at Nintendo who's in charge of this has some mental health problems. So because of the shitty performance-based matchmaking, you are not only making it harder for people to rank up, you're also rendering the ranking system that you put into the game useless. Your rank is now abstract and doesn't represent your skill level, but rather how much you decide to endure on a day-to-day basis. Getting back to the people who I play against, I would have no issue playing against them if my rank warranted me playing against them. If I were S+20 or S+30, I would understand completely. However, since I can't rank up, I now run the risk of ruining someone else's experience because they could, for instance, just get into S+0. But here I am in S+3 as someone who's been playing the game for over 7 years. How is that fair to the player who is used to fighting C, B, and A rankers? Instead of letting me shit on these players, let me beat them temporarily at the beginning of each season and then have me rank up into a rank I'm supposed to be in. Then I can remain in that rank due to the competition and up my skill to try to get out of it. Instead, Nintendo would rather me play against these inexperienced players when I hop on the game for the first time in the day, and then when I just start to do good, pair me against damn near pros who I now have no business playing against. And how is this building my skill? Why is it that before this dumbass system was implemented, I would get S plus 11, S plus 13, and S plus 15 in the first 3 seasons respectively? But in Season 4, I left off being S plus 2. In Season 5, I was S plus 5. And as I'm updating this part of the script, I'm S plus 0 in Season 6. The funny thing is that I'm better, my movement, decision making, how I contribute to the pacing of the game, building specials at the right time, ascertaining the objective, all of that has improved since last year. I've even picked up skills along the way, but my rank will not show that. Some of you might be wondering where I'm getting my standard and expectations of competition from, and that is Splatoon 2. In Splatoon 2, S plus 9 was easy for me once I hit Quad X rank. I would get demoted from Rainmaker, get a bunch of 20 bombs in S plus 9, and then I would get put back into X rank Rainmaker, all in the same 2-hour rotation. There was a distinct difference between X rank and S plus 9 lobbies in Splatoon 2 in terms of enemy skill level. But here in Splatoon 3, most of my Anarchy games feel harder than my X rank games at the tender rank of S plus 0. So not only does this create a terrible playing experience and validates the ranking system, but it also causes ridiculous disparities. Now, I also made a whole video on this that you're more than welcome to watch, but people used to tell you to stop blaming your teammates for losses.
That's why you, well, okay, I'll talk you directly. That's why you're stuck in S. You have this wrong mentality to always blame. Like, how do you see how you are? You're gonna be the one person to always blame your teammates where things will go wrong. And that's why you're fucking stuck.
Which is something that would happen since, you know, Splatoon is a team-based game you're forced to play solo. And it would feel that way sometimes. But now, nobody says that. Because not only do we have kills and deaths displayed after a match, but multiple YouTubers saying they get matched against really good players and their teammates are little Timmies, quote unquote. And when hearing that, you're like, yeah, okay, whatever you say, pal. But no, it's probably a reality. I mean, look at these screenshots of teammates being absolutely incompetent. And that is solely because of how matchmaking will either expect you to carry a bunch of trash cans due to your high performance, or just randomize you with players in the S plus 0 to S plus 50 range. 2 different universes of skill level.
Yo, where's Louis?
Good snipe, get back on tower. We're in overtime right now. Give me the fuck. The only incentive I see for Nintendo doing this is a lack of players in general, which is bogus as hell. Splatoon 3 sold 11 million copies in 1 year and was the fastest selling game in Japan. It's within the top 20 most sold video games on the Nintendo Switch, and under Splatoon 2 is the most sold predominantly online multiplayer title on the Switch. And in Splatoon 2, they would separate the player base based on skill. Not very well, but much better than this. First of all, every lobby in Ranked was divided based on weapon composition. This was so that the game environment would flow a little smoother, as each team would get the best of most worlds to fulfill different weapon and team roles. And in X Rank, there are about 3 different thresholds. These thresholds would divide players by the average X rank in the lobby. This isn't accurate, but let's say that there was a player pool of 1890 X rankers all the way to 2000, then 2000 to 2200, then 2300 and above. So forgive me, Nintendo, for finding it extremely hard to believe the lack of player count is the reason for this horrible matchmaking system, when this game has almost the same amount of sales 1 year in than a game that wasn't afraid to break people up based on game rank and not game performance. The issue of performance-based matchmaking, which should really only be implemented in tournaments, makes the environment of Splatoon 3 unbearable at worst and unfair at best. I should not be playing against old top 10 and top 500 players who are probably S plus 20 at least when I'm in S plus 3. S rank should not be liable to play against pro players when going to rank up to S plus. C rank should play against C rank until they reach B rank, and the same with B rank until B rank reaches A rank. What the fuck happened to this system? Because I've definitely enjoyed Splatoon 3 a lot less once I stopped playing against people who were the same rank as me and started playing against tryhards as soon as I would do decent. The online optimization for Splatoon 3 is something that you would want to hear come out of Dave Chappelle's mouth. It isn't something you would want to hear come out of Amy Schumer's. I think the sentence Splatoon 3's online optimization is an oxymoron. For most, this is the biggest and objectively the worst issue of Splatoon 3. When I was writing this part of the script, I was playing Splatoon 3 and got a fucking connection error. That should give you some insight on how ass the online optimization is. We'll tackle these points separately, but when I say online optimization, I mean connection issues, hit detection, and tick rate. Now people say that Nintendo charges us $20 a year for online. You would think that, shut the fuck up. PlayStation charges you $60 a year to play online, and Xbox Game Pass Ultimate is $16.99 a month after a $1 initial month. That's almost the entire yearly price of NSO for 1 month. So unless you are formulating a sentence to the effect of, for $20 a year, I would expect Nintendo Switch Online to be bad, shut the fuck up. It always irks me to hear people say the opposite because it's just so unintuitive. Now that we have that out the way, let's tear Nintendo apart. Nintendo, just because your shitty online service costs $20 a year for the standard package, which is below all of your other competitors, doesn't give you the excuse to have your online service live up to the adjective shitty. It's to a point where your competitor's high price is positively correlated with the quality their service has over yours. Because Splatoon 3 isn't the only game under NSO to have atrocious online quality. Let's not forget about Splatoon 2 and that game's connection errors popping up when I was wired to my fucking Wi-Fi 6 router. And Splatoon 1's connection errors were so ass that it would occur maybe 40% of the games that I played. Splatoon was on the Wii U and thus didn't require an online subscription to play online, but it sure as hell made me want one. And don't go, maybe your internet was just bad. I didn't disconnect from 40% of my games in Splatoon 1. That may be the case, but I would literally play Black Ops 2 on the Wii U and would be completely fine. I say all of this to say that Splatoon 3 and Splatoon in general is just notorious for connection issues. And like I fucking mentioned at the beginning of this video, Splatoon 3's potential is unfortunately botched by Nintendo, their inexperience with managing online multiplayer titles, and their unwillingness to learn from their previous mistakes. I get that Splatoon is your first serious online multiplayer title, but this franchise has been out for 8 years, and you are a multi-billion-dollar corporation. It's just hard for me to accept this coming from Nintendo. So what hasn't Nintendo learned in the past 8 years of their franchise being out? Well, to not use peer-to-peer connectivity when it hasn't fucking worked for even 1 out of the past 8 years. Now, as an individual human being, if you want to complete a certain goal, would you do something that not only doesn't bring you towards your goal, but away from it for 8 consecutive years? I would look at you and determine that 1, you need to be slapped the shit out of, and maybe some neurons will actually turn on in your brain and cause it to start functioning. Or 2, you just don't actually want to obtain that specific goal. What is peer-to-peer connectivity? Well, it's a form of online connectivity which deviates from the method normal online games use, which is dedicated servers. For reference, Call of Duty implemented dedicated servers 12 years ago with Black Ops 2, which, come to think of it, might have been the reason why I wouldn't disconnect from Black Ops 2 Wii U and would Splatoon 1. But to answer the question, it's a network which splits the workload of that network among its participants. It was originally designed to help multiple individual computers run more efficiently without the use of a whole ass entire server. So how does this apply to Lagtoon 3? So basically, the consoles communicate with one another. In the case of Splatoon 3, 7 switches owned by the players will communicate with the 8th player, that 8th player being the host. And I don't actually mean the 8th player, it could have been the first player in the lobby, for instance. Then the host would act as the server. Not only is having a console fulfilling the role of an actual server less stable, but it's a Nintendo Switch, a console built with 10-year-old hardware. In short, you're connected. I don't know why I said console so condescendingly. It is a console. It's just it's an outdated console. It's a console built with old hardware. I'm sorry, that was so condescending. In short, your connection quality is contingent on the host's connection. With the lack of information known to the public and acknowledgement from Nintendo on how shitty this connection type is, I'm left to believe that this decision was made in the interest of saving money. One of the main advantages of a peer-to-peer network system is that it costs way less than client-server connection. Some might suggest that due to the nature of the Nintendo Switch being a hybrid console, maybe peer-to-peer connectivity was the only way to go. But even if Nintendo had a better reason for sticking with this connectivity type, let's not pretend that Nintendo doesn't primarily operate with the notion to save money. All of their consoles since the Wii have been underpowered due to the GameCube losing them a lot of market share. I've described the Nintendo Switch as being unapologetically underpowered several times in the past. And when given the opportunity to make a Switch Pro that even Bloomberg thought to have existed, they gave us the Switch OLED. Nintendo is a company who takes advantage of their image of producing family-friendly titles and uses it as a scapegoat to not have to produce higher demanding hardware. Because why spend so much money on building hardware that is built to run high demanding video games when you don't even make high demanding video games? And thus, the hardware ends up being cheaper to make, which makes Nintendo a profit. And so I wouldn't put it past them to use an outdated connection system in the interest of saving money, when that's what they've been doing for almost 20 years. And it's also different for Splatoon 3. Even though it's a flagship Nintendo Switch game and their main online multiplayer game, what does that really amount to? Splatoon doesn't affect Nintendo how Fortnite affects Epic Games, or how Call of Duty affects Activision. Activision, for instance, better use a fucking client server for their connectivity, because if Call of Duty becomes unplayable, Activision is as good as But as long as Zelda and Mario are good, Nintendo doesn't have to really worry about Splatoon 3. Splatoon 3 is not the face of Nintendo, so they have the grounds to get away with stupid shit like this. If we were to all stop playing Splatoon 3 right now, I genuinely don't think Nintendo would give a fuck. Splatoon 3 feels like Nintendo throwing us a bone. We are at the mercy of Nintendo because we never had a real online multiplayer shooter, and this is all we've got. I would have saved this bit for the end of the video, but I think the connection issues give us a real insight on Nintendo's attitude. When you would disconnect from a match while in Splatoon 2, you would get a warning, and then you would get a 5-minute timeout. And despite whether you were winning or not at the time of the disconnect, the game treats it as though you force disconnected or rage quit off the game. This means that the game you played would be treated like a loss. So not only would Splatoon 2 kick you off the match for factors you couldn't control, it would hand you a loss and then say, make sure your internet isn't busted. No, how about you make sure Hisashi Nogami's jaw isn't busted after I pull up on... Whoa! Anyways, I'm led to believe Nintendo saw how fucking stupid this was and waited until Splatoon 3 to fix the issue. Instead of updating their damn game, Splatoon 3 will now count the match as no contest if someone were disconnected from a match within the first minute of the game. The bulk of my disconnects come from someone else disconnecting at the start of a match, and then the game will end a couple seconds later. Rarely have I just randomly disconnected from a Splatoon 3 match out of the blue, like I used to do all the time in Splatoon 2, so I guess there's an improvement to be noted, aside from the fact that it literally happened a day after writing this part of the script. A lot of people don't like this system and ask Nintendo to place a bot in one of their games instead, but I think this is a fair system. Yeah, it sucks if someone from your team disconnects after the first minute and have the match show up as no contest, but that's better than how Splatoon 2 handled disconnects by a long shot. But again, my thing is, why are you making precautions for an issue you can just fix on your own? I'm extremely interested in seeing if the next Nintendo console will have Splatoon 3, and if they would use the opportunity of having a new system to use a client-server connection type, and then see the change in experience. Because when multi-millionaires, aka people who have access to the best internet, are streaming themselves playing this game, and even they disconnect out of the blue, you know it's not an issue of one's internet.
Feels good. Nintendo should just be sued. It's a crime against humanity how bad their online service is. And before DC. Nah, I doubt it'll DC this time. I got a good feeling about this one. Ooh! Was that even me? Oh, this game doesn't work.
In my experience, using an Ethernet cable will lower the frequency of the disconnects, but it doesn't completely solve the issue. Without an Ethernet, expect to experience some tomfoolery once every 10 to 15 matches, because unfortunately, this is a common issue. Now, when you aren't disconnecting, you have to worry about tick rate and hit detection, or a lack thereof. Tick rate is the frequency, or how often the game updates itself. This is not to get confused with frames per second, as when I described what tick rate was in a That SRB2 Dude stream, the chat tried to tell me that I was describing FPS and not tick rate. Like, no bitch, not according to Google I'm not. Frames per second is the amount of time an individual frame on your screen updates itself, which is dependent on not only the game you're playing, but your hardware. A higher frame per second count means the frames on the screen are appearing at a faster rate, i.e. 60 frames per second versus 30 frames per second. This means you get to see things on your screen more clearly, and thus when interacting with what's on the screen, because it's more clear, things like input delay and responsiveness gets a whole lot better. A higher tick rate means the faster the game processes and produces data. This means the higher your tick rate is, the faster what's actually happening in the game appears on your screen. This is a direct result from the server processing the data it receives and sending it back to the player. Thus, a good tick rate is dependent on the server's connection. And if you're paying attention to what I said 5 minutes ago, you would know why this is an issue on Splatoon 3. It's because Splatoon 3 uses peer-to-peer connectivity instead of client servers, meaning the tick rate is more liable to be horrendous. And horrendous it is. Rainbow Six Siege runs at 60 Hz. CSGO, a game that came out over 10 years ago, runs at 64 Hz. Dota 2 apparently runs at 30 Hz, and Fortnite also runs at 30. Splatoon 3, on the other hand, a game newer than all of those previously mentioned and run by a multi-billion-dollar corporation that has been running the video game industry for over 30 years, runs at a grand total of 15 hertz, according to Oatmeal Dome. Nintendo continues to fuck up. Anyways, how will the embarrassingly low 15 hertz tick rate affect your gameplay? Well, remember when we would play Call of Duty and you swore that you ran behind cover and then suddenly you died. And then you looked at the kill cam to see that the person who killed you shot and killed you before you ran behind the wall. And then you're thinking to yourself,
I was behind cover! The difference from what is apparently happening in the game and what I'm seeing on my screen is so astronomical that I don't even know if I'm playing the same video game as these people.
how is that even possible? I very fucking clearly ran behind the wall. And if I were dead before I ran past the wall, how was I able to run past the wall on my screen? Well, when the tick rate is low, what happens on the host screen or someone with a slightly better connection to the host/server in your screen is completely different. This is because within those split seconds, your game didn't update in time. Basically, you ran behind the wall, but the game couldn't process the fact that you did in fact run behind the wall in time. And because of the low tick rates, things like this are liable to occur. In the case of Splatoon 3, fighting a sniper sometimes is like fighting a literal time machine, as the sniper will snipe where you were a literal entire second ago and will still kill you. Normal guns aren't safe though. It happens with literally all weapon types. It's just most apparent in snipers, shooters, and blasters. If you play the game, you all know when a blaster randomly stops shooting and then it's like, wait, why did they just stop shooting? But no, they didn't. It just took a second for the final shot to update on your screen, and it turns out they already killed you. I also know that you've seen people shoot their weapons and nothing comes out of the gun that they're using. But make no mistake, they are in fact shooting as the ink appears on the floor literal seconds later. Imagine seeing somebody running in Call of Duty, but in actuality, you are taking damage because they're shooting at you. Imagine how broken that would feel. I also know that most of you have seen higher ranking players or just better players literally kill you faster than normal. Not because of their aim, but because they're either hosting or they just have a better connection than you do. The easiest and most common way to see the horrible tick rate is when you kill the Rainmaker right before the game ends, and the game will still end, and the person on the other team who scored the Rainmaker will show up dead slightly afterwards behind the game over screen. I'd say realistically, if you are a player without an Ethernet cable, you're liable to have an absolutely abysmal experience. And furthermore, when you aren't being kicked out of the game can gaslight you into thinking people have gotten fair kills on you, when in reality, the video game is riddled with underlying connection issues. If you do have an Ethernet cable, the same thing applies, just at a less ridiculous rate. But as I said before, some bullshit happens once every 10 games or so. Oh, and if you want to decrease that number to once every 3 or once every 2 games, just play the game after 10 p.m. You're gonna be in for it. Most of the American players will be asleep, and most of the Japanese players will be awake. So your lobbies will fill up with Japanese players, and the connection disparity is not going to work in your favor. It's going to work in their favor. But let's get one thing straight. You're not just the victim in this situation. You're also the assailant, because this works on the opposite end of the coin too. You can, and you very well will, get kills on players you had no business getting. Sometimes people shoot straight at me and it's like I didn't even have a hitbox for half a second and I just killed them when they should have definitely killed me instead. I remember one game where the first half of it, the bullshit was working in my favor and my team was dominating. And then in the second half of the game, the bullshit was working for the enemy team. And the same kids who we were just spanking are dominating us now. In conclusion, I have no idea what Nintendo's incentive was for implementing peer-to-peer connectivity, but they're drunk if they think it should remain in the game. Hopefully, Nintendo's next console uses client-server connectivity like the rest of the fucking world. Like I said in my many flaws of Splatoon 2 video, it doesn't matter if you're a pro, tryhard, or casual. this issue will affect you. Video games can be known for many things. To me, Call of Duty is known for declining in quality every single year and will never provide an experience it was able to a decade ago. Fall Guys is the game that got killed off by Among Us. Among Us was the longest lasting fad. Splitgate was the shortest. Apex Legends is the game that failed to go toe-to-toe with Fortnite. Fortnite is the game that lost its identity, sold out to every IP in existence for a cash grab, and will never find its charm that made it so popular initially. But all of these things are subjective reasons for not playing those horrible video games. Connection errors and horrible tick rate is an objective reason to stay away from a game. And when Splatoon 3 and Splatoon in general is notorious for connection issues, an objective reason to stay away from said game, how are people on the outside looking in supposed to feel? I wish Nintendo actually respected the people who dedicate their time and energy to one of their several games. But then again, I'm playing on a piece of hardware that was made by people who didn't think to put an Ethernet port in the back of it until 2021. An Apple iPhone 12 is probably stronger than... okay, let's get back on track. Nintendo's lack of involvement with Splatoon 3 is unsurprising. When I say lack of involvement, I mean their approach with managing the game, mainly the social aspect of this game. Nintendo and the competitive scene are two things that stick together like water and oil. Nintendo is too stupid to return the demand and monetize Smash Bros tournaments, instead of getting the easiest bag of cash by returning the demand of a 20-year-old game. They notoriously cease and desist Smash Melee tournaments, and when they partnered with Panda Global to host a Smash World Tour, they canceled it with no remorse. So what in the hell would lead me to believe that they'll handle Splatoon properly? Nintendo takes the most infuriating hands-off approach with managing Splatoon 3's social status. During the first Splatfest, before the game even came out, Nintendo had garnered enough interest in the game to have 61,500 viewers on Twitch. It won Multiplayer Game of the Year, and even though it went up against Multiverses, which was a fad, Overwatch 2, one of the biggest letdowns in gaming, and Modern Warfare 3, which is a Call of Duty game, it still means something to have Best Multiplayer Game of the Year. Now, the interest in the game, according to Google Trends, is at an all-time low since its release, and the current Twitch viewer count for Splatoon 3 is 500, 61,000 less than what it was before release. The top Splatoon YouTubers have upwards of 100,000 subs, which is 99,000 more subs than my channel, don't get me wrong. However, we see people who predominantly post Call of Duty, Fortnite, and even other games who have well over 1 million subs. How does Kiver have around 20,000 subscribers and hundreds of competitive Fortnite YouTubers have at least 100,000? Because Nintendo doesn't treat the social aspect of Splatoon 3 properly, and in turn, it doesn't garner much general attention to the game. One of the ways Nintendo could, but doesn't, keep the attention on Splatoon 3 is through competition. First off, there is no coherent way to enter or join tournaments. In fact, the entire competitive scene in this game is 98% community driven. You know that game, Fortnite, and how there are literal cash cups which let you know they exist by clicking 2 tabs while in the main menu? If it's the same system as it was when I was playing the game, then you get Champions League in Arena, maybe the equivalent of 2200 X power in Splatoon 3. After that, literally anyone in that player pool can join and compete every 2 weeks or so. In Splatoon 3, you'll need to join a cult just to understand how anything competitive works. There's Ludi, or Leagues Under the Ink, which is community led. Ink TV, is that still a thing? None of these tournaments are Nintendo led. And then like once every 2 years, Nintendo will host a tournament, which how the fuck does that work? I can't tell you. Yeah, just go on Twitter or Discord or something. Because Nintendo doesn't handle Splatoon 3 properly, an individual would have to go so far out of their way to participate in anything competitive. And these things aren't even broadcasted half the time, or are broadcasted on very small platforms, which again, you would have to go out of your way to even know exists. Bro, that SRB2 dude went to a so-called major tournament and became a UK Splatoon 3 champion. Do you know how he got the footage? Somebody recorded it off their cell phone because this major tournament wasn't broadcasted. What the hell? Okay, my fault. I stand corrected. It was broadcasted. My bad. My bad. Hey, look at dude. He looks happy as shit. Yo, why does Kiver look like that, bro? What the hell? He looks like he was handed sour milk, not a fucking trophy. Without Nintendo broadcasting or making a competitive system in-game, it indirectly negates the mainstream's ability to detect the nuance in the colorful kids shooting game. This is one of the most unique multiplayer games ever created. It's a balanced enough game with a high skill ceiling and a strong community. Why is it there is no competitive opportunity for players who only stay on Splatoon 3 and are forced to heavily engage in Twitter and Discord, avenues run by community members, not professionals? Come on, Nintendo. And that's all I can really say, because they won't change a thing. They gave us a multiple page document explaining the rules to hosting a competitive tournament while using one of their games. Basically, being completely hands off while writing rigorous requirements for third-party event organizers instead of hosting tournaments their damn selves. Nintendo is grateful that our customers share their passion for the games, characters, and worlds that we create. No. Clearly you don't. It's pretty evident that you don't. Hey, I know a couple of people in the Smash community that can reject this claim, bro. In Splatoon 3, they don't even offer you a chance to meet new players in-game because there is no voice or party chat on the system in a team-based game. At least allow me to add people within the application, then allow us to join a party so we can, I don't know, communicate. I've gone over this topic in several previous videos of mine, so I won't go on for too much longer. Unfortunately, I think the solution involves Nintendo fundamentally changing their approach to video games in general, which I don't think they'll do for many, many years. And now I'm going to get into my minor issues with multiplayer, which isn't as prevalent as the major ones I just listed. Let's start off with old items in the catalog showing up in the shop. I know some people don't like the limited time catalog system because it holds items for a limited time. Thus, this being in the game might please some people, but in my opinion, it drastically lowers the value of the items that are in the catalog. The catalog holds exclusive items. So why do these so-called exclusive items reappear in the shop? Do you know my disappointment when I saw the tier 100 shades appear in the headgear shop? Why did I spend all of the first season, and the 5th season getting these shades just for them to be available in the clothing shop, probably to lazily diversify their clothing shops? Which brings me to my next point. The clothing shops are unambitious. The amount of cloned gear with new colors and gear from Splatoon 2 that is in the gear stores is not acceptable. The only time the gear in the shops were ambitious was during Season 1. I knew there was a problem when I hadn't bought anything in the shops from mid-Season 3 to Season 5, and still had most of the items in each gear store. Furthermore, most of these items look like they could have been in Splatoon 2. Most of these items are basic looking, but I guess I shouldn't be complaining, seeing the absurd lengths you have to go through to even customize the gear to your liking. Challenges last for 2 hours, whenever they do and consistently appear. Why can't this be the length of a whole weekend, like in Splatfest? Probably because it either replaces Turf War or ranked battles. But the funny thing is that Nintendo, nobody told you to do that. Why are you creating problems that don't need to be there just to force yourself to work your way around them? In the most recent challenge, it actually didn't replace any of the game modes, so I just thought I'd mention that correction there. But anyways, why the fuck is there a dynamic duos mode when there isn't even a way to communicate or add people in the game of Splatoon 3? That aside, I personally only participated in 2 challenges because I just so happened to be on during those given times. 2 hours is an outrageous window for LTMs that appear on a monthly basis. Splatoon 3 doesn't have League Play. With the addition of League Play, we would have had all game modes available at one time. It's a more competitive game type, and the fact that there was a Dynamics Duos challenge mode reminded me that there isn't a League Play, which could definitely use a 2v2 playlist to spice things up. Weapons don't always work properly and or consistently. Nintendo makes some of the weapons in this game fundamentally inconsistent in order to balance them. The shooters are the main example of this. Because of weapon painting and shooters being fully automatic, there is rightfully some RNG that comes with shooting these weapons. This means that the weapon will randomly shoot off target in a random direction for a split second while holding down the trigger. However, it's the randomness of the RNG that makes it unfair. If, for instance, if my straight line of fire always deviates to the right for a split second while while shooting, it could turn into something that I can account for as I build my skill with that weapon. But when the deviation in the shot is random, it forces you to have that much more of an upper hand on an enemy while being on target. Now this isn't an issue a lot of the time, but sometimes it leaves you with instances where you will be on target and remain on target long enough, but you don't get the kill. And on the receiving end, enemies can inconsistently splat you. Maybe they jump up in the air and hit all of their RNG shots.
Oh my gosh, you're joking. No any kill, oh my god, bro, what?
He was jumping in the air and still hit that shot, bro. Which is just completely unintuitive because you know that RNG is activated whenever you jump. In the case of weapons like the .96 Gal and the Gluga Doodlies, Nintendo recognized that it has an extremely fast kill time. So what did they do? They made the RNG even more erratic. It makes the 96 a considerable downgrade from Splatoon 2's version.
We're just jousting. And my 92 didn't work. It turned into a 96. If that was a 52, I would have got a double kill. Oh my god. Look at the consistency. Oh my lord. Oh my lord slash god. You already know which way to go. What the fuck are you doing, Osprey?
And the Glugas are still a weapon that I don't know how to play against, because 1 second it's the best gun in the game, and another it's complete shit. With the blasters, if you jump, the shot will either fly off to the hard right or fly off to the hard left. There is no issue with making a weapon that can one-shot an opponent deviate from its crosshairs when one is jumping. However, the direction, again, shouldn't be randomized. I think being able to account for your shot going slightly to the left, for instance, while you are jumping is, again, something that would encourage skill building. But when I'm punished for having to jump with my weapon and not be able to have what was otherwise an on-target shot land, is unfair, because it's not completely outside of the realm of possibility to having to jump in a Splatoon 3 match. Lastly, the cooler weapons in this game have a much higher barrier of entry. To a new player who just got motion controls down, what do you think is more appealing? The weapon that shoots straight 90% of the time that is unlocked at a low level, or an Explosher? One of the most useless weapons unless you are a wizard at the game, and then it becomes overpowered. Will a new player feel more comfortable using the Splattershot Pro or the Mini Splatling? Will a new player feel more comfortable using the Splattershot Pro or the Bamboozler? I say this to say that a lot of the more complex weapons will require the crossing of a skill threshold in order to become more effective. Snipers are the easiest example of this. If you aren't hitting shots, you're literally a sitting duck, and at higher levels, you're as good as not even being on the team. I'm sure everyone knows the feeling of hiding from a sniper in the first moments of the game, testing to see how good they are, and if you can get away with just pushing and killing them. If you don't master the ridiculous button maneuvering that the Dualies, Nautilus, and or Ballpoint requires, you're gonna have a bad time. Just to obtain good movement with them requires that you go through a skill threshold. If you don't know how to play behind your team, check your map for damage dealt, and literally land shots in only the most important spots, the Explosion is a weapon that will run out of ink faster than you can get a connection error, and will make you a sitting duck in the process. The Tri-Stringer, don't even get me started. I mean, it has stopping power, but that's about it. The Brellas, I mean, even good Brella players falter because of how ass that weapon type is. Personally, I call Brellas the ticklers because that's what it does to the opponent. You get the idea. It takes entirely too long to level up in this game. Leveling up the catalog is fine, but leveling up your actual level is something you shouldn't actively try to do because it just takes too damn long.
Well, there is a badge for reaching the new max level in Splatoon 3. Level 999.
But that can't be that hard, right?
You have no idea. First off, how much XP do you need to get to level 999? You would assume that past level 50, it just sticks with 100k XP per level. But you see, that's where you're wrong, because Nintendo is a evil corporation who has absolutely zero respect for their fans. Because at level 499, the amount of XP you need to level up increases from 100k per level to 150k per level. And again, at 599, it increases yet again to 200k XP per level. See where this is going now? Adding all of this up, you would need a total of 170,930,967
Is this nigga serious?
XP to go all the way from level 1 to 999. But just how long would this take? Let's look at Porsche SP2, a Splatoon XP grinder on Twitter. The last time he shared his hours publicly, he had accumulated 1,500 hours and was at almost level 300 exactly. It took him 27.5 million XP to get to level 300. So, if it took him 1,500 hours to get to 27.5 million XP as of February 11th, he was 16.11% to level 999. It would take him approximately 9,500 hours to reach level 999. Just to put that into perspective, that is an entire year and 1 month of your life spent exclusively playing Splatoon.
Fuck no, baby!
Speaking of taking too damn long, why the fuck does it take 10 times as much ink to 5-star weapon than it does to 4-star weapon? With over 400 hours of playtime, I have 5-starred a grand total of 1 weapon. And that was after 3 seasons and having a life in between. All for a damn sticker, which is how I know y'all have no lives when I see 3 of them hoes on your banner. You could point to the fact that I use a lot of different weapons, but I literally only have 500,000 XP on one of my weapons other than the one I 5-starred, which is only halfway between the 4 and 5-star weapon status. Speaking of weapons, we probably won't get all of our weapon kits. I'd expect every single weapon to at least have 2 different variants, with Splatoon 2 giving us 3 different variants of each weapon, including the vanilla weapon. It's unfortunately to see how Nintendo is ambitious in one area, like making sure we get 2 new maps every single season, but unambitious in others. Theater mode and capture mode don't coexist. You have to do one without the other. The Christmas themed Splatfest took place after Christmas. And now we'll get into some things in the game that just don't make sense. The Splatana can take out a wave breaker in 2 hits. Both Splatanas can take you out in 1 hit if you are separated from the Splatana by half a wall, which would intuitively half its damage output. The Ink Vac is Superman, and the Splatana is an immortal deity made completely out of kryptonite. I just think it's jarring how no other weapon can bitch an Ink Vac like a Splatana can. Ultra Stamp and Kraken's kill range is higher than the special model. In other words, their hitboxes are disproportionately wide, but I'll let it slide because it doesn't bother me too much. The Reef Slider needs a larger explosion radius because its tertiary use, getting from point A to point B, shouldn't be the primary according to pro players. That's like telling me the primary purpose for using the Booyah Bomb is so that your teammates can fill their special gauge. I know there's an issue with Reef Slider being able to completely turn a zone in one use, so if that issue outweighs the issue of its damage output, maybe at least grant the player using Reef Slider with some immunity for damage for a short period of time after using the Reef Slider. I think that would make it on par with all of the other specials in the game, because the Reef Slider, it's a panic button basically. Number 1 popular target, number 1 super jump spot, and number 1 splat assister should all be silver medals, while number 1 zone hero, number 1 tower stopper, number 1 rainmaker carrier / stopper, and number 1 clam stopper should be gold medals. Custom matches are overly complicated to set up while simultaneously having minimal options. It's also not possible to play them solo with octoling like bots. So you have to get your ass kicked if you want to learn a new weapon at the expense of your time, energy, and rank. You know, the same shit I said about Splatoon 2.
X rank is too easy to enter, with anyone S+0 or better being able to enter X rank instead of S+10 like in Splatoon 2. This is why the average X rank is down, because people who are used to fighting A and S rankers want to be cool and play matches in the hardest game mode. I mean, I don't blame you guys, but there's no reason why there's a 1700 X power. Like, really? Also, the amount of gold medals doesn't really influence the amount of points you gain and lose when you're in high level X rank. It's based entirely on your win-loss ratio of the series and how strong you were compared to the enemy team. I mean, I like this system, which is called Glico 2, but medals were put into the game for this exact reason. Not having them influence how many points you receive is very weird to me, especially for lower levels, as the rank of your team can influence how you perform. Top that off with the fact that you're liable to be paired with or against kids who just graduated S rank. I like the idea that you can rank up while losing anarchy battles, but that shouldn't be the reason why the entire pool of S+ players, S+0 to S+50, are pooled together. Oh, and I almost forgot, the Tri-Slosher, the side sloshes or whatever you want to call them, deal the same amount of damage as the front one,
which is why it was so overpowered in Splatoon 2. Now I don't really care about this, but there are so many guns that reward the player for being off target, like blasters. Nintendo knows this, so they reduce the damage for an indirect shot and increase the damage for a direct shot, as they should. So, why does the Tri-Slosher get rewarded for being off target with no downsides? The Tri-Slosher isn't a weapon that pisses me off, so I don't really care, but it would be nice to keep things consistent. I think I just about touched on everything I wanted to with the multiplayer. Splatoon 3's multiplayer at its core is a very unique and fun game that you can find nothing else like. Once you get heavily invested in the game, however, Nintendo leaves you with a lot of things to be wishful for. These things are primarily spawned from Nintendo's decline in consistent ambition, a lack of experience with online shooters, and a lack of desire to improve the experience they provide. There's no way this game is Splatoon 2.5, and it is the best Splatoon game in the series. However, there are certain things that are implemented in Splatoon 3 and certain things that aren't, which makes components of the game unacceptable. There seems to be a lack of consistent ambition or a lack of coherent game direction. Like I previously mentioned, it makes no sense how every season introduces 2 new maps and then the weapon kits aren't complete, or the new catalog uses repeat items from previous catalogs. Nintendo also turns a blind eye to their online fidelity, knowing it's bad, but doesn't care enough to switch, no pun intended, the server type. They also don't engage with the community appropriately, leaving competitive to be almost completely player-driven, despite actual esports organizations endorsing this game in the past, like Ghost Gaming. I appreciate Nintendo for creating one of my favorite games. However, they will update said game and execute new ideas for the game in the ways they want to, which is proven to be tangential from the ways in which those new things need to be executed and implemented.
Me and Cosby, shit a hottie, bust a Kaladi, too deep, I be with Yagi, we spin a Harlem like it's a hobby.
I know that ain't who I think it is.
Because you know that RNG is activated whenever you jump.
What?
start off by giving Salmon Run some praise. It's a step up from Splatoon 2 Salmon Run. It's now available all the time and doesn't go on rotation. The difficulty is also a step up from Splatoon 2's, and in my case, I'd actually have to invest more time and energy to get to max level. Unfortunately, more time and energy than I'm willing to give Salmon Run. It's funny that I wrote that part in the script given the fact that I am max level now, but we'll continue. The egg throw is a good addition that makes playing the game a lot more convenient, and overall, Salmon Run serves as a good side mode or even a main game mode if you want to invest more time into it, as that option is more viable than it was in Splatoon 2. My first critique is the loss of elusiveness and mystery. In Splatoon 2, we didn't know who Mr. Grizz was, and in Splatoon 3, he was revealed in the story mode. And because he plays the exact same role he did in Splatoon 2, he loses all mystery and character nuance, given the fact that we actually know who he is now. He's even nicer to you in this game than he was in Splatoon 2, despite him being the main antagonist of Splatoon 3. And remember Save Our Salmons? I made a conspiracy theory video on this a couple years back, and it turned out to be one of my most popular Splatoon 2 videos. Because of his cryptic message, we thought that it would further enhance the Salmon Run game mode. All of a sudden, we're questioning whether or not we are the bad guys. And again, who is Mr. Grizz? Then the Splatoon 3 reveal trailer comes out and we're fighting alongside a salmonid. This is interesting. So imagine my disappointment when they show off Splatoon 3 Salmon Run a year later, and it's a carbon copy of Splatoon 2 Salmon Run with the ability to throw eggs. At least that's what it looked like at the time. Of course, we now know that this isn't the case. Nevertheless, Nintendo garnered a lot of attention with this cryptic message alone, but lo and behold, they proceeded to skip the opportunity to change up Salmon Run and potential story it could have had, and major changes to gameplay. I would say that it was just a picture, but with the reveal of the single player's little buddy, it definitely seemed like that picture was going somewhere when it was going nowhere. We don't even know why we fight alongside little buddy in the single player. Anyways, we got a new map, Sockeye Station, which is probably the best map in my opinion. We have another new map, Gone Fishing Hydro Plant, which is very oppressive. I don't really fancy this map. Then there is the returning Spawning Grounds map from Splatoon 2. This map is actually terrible. Maybe if the grates weren't grates or the area underneath them were somewhat operational, then it would be better. In Season 2, we get the return of Marooner's Bay. People for some reason don't like this map, but in my opinion, it's fine. I've played much worse, like Spawning Grounds and Gone Fishing. In Season 4, we get a new map, Jammin' Salmon Junction. I personally never played on this map, but it looks pretty bad. It may not be. You know, if this game allowed me to play custom matches, maybe I could play it, but Nintendo wants to act like they've never made a game with good offline custom games options. Mario Kart 8 update. I have since played on Slammin', Jammin', Salmon, whatever the fuck, and it's actually my new favorite Salmon Run map. Remember kids, don't judge a book by its cover. In Season 5, they added my favorite Salmon Run map from Splatoon 2, Salmonage Smokeyard. Psych! I fucking hate this map. It's only good on low tide, and even then, I've never in my gaming career had the map be the primary issue in a PvE until I played on Salmonage Smokeyard. How y'all don't like Marooner's Bay, but then play Salmonage Smokeyard is beyond me. Unfortunately, all of the boss salmonids from Splatoon 2 make a return in this game. I say unfortunately because the fly fish is back. Obviously, it's a good thing that all the boss and normal salmonids return. However, I do think there is an issue with the fly fish, as it takes too long to kill one relative to how long it takes to kill any other boss. It either requires half of the team to focus on one single boss out of hundreds of enemies, or for one player to become a sitting duck when there are hundreds of enemies. And by the time you're done with it, you're at 30% of your ink tank. Anyways, there were also a healthy amount of new boss salmonids that were introduced in this title. You have the fish stick, which makes use of the Squid Surge. There's the Flipper Flopper, which doesn't utilize any new mechanic, but a new gameplay loop. The same goes for the Slammin' Lid. Then there's the Big Shot, and in a separate wave type, the Mud Mouth. All in all, these bosses are good additions and flavors up the way you play Salmon Run. There's also a new Salmon Run game mode, which is called Big Run. It's a limited time mode which lasts for 2 days, where you can play Salmon Run on a multiplayer map. So far, we've gotten on Wahoo World Inkblot Art Academy, Undertow Spillway, and Umami Ruins. And then of course, there is the extra wave, which is what I want to get into. The extra wave is something that occurs once your meter is full from winning a certain amount of runs. It will then occur after you complete a third wave. Now personally, hearing the distorted victory music followed by the siren and the emergency text is hype. It puts you in the right atmosphere right as the King Salmonid appears. Then you fight a massive King Salmonid. The game, upon release, introduced the King Kohozuna and then later introduced Ouroboros. Just recently, they added Megalodontia. They're really cool bosses and would be fun to fight, but they are very obviously too difficult to, especially when freelancing, and especially when you are of a higher level. The issue is that you need to shoot golden eggs at the King Salmonid, which already doesn't do enough damage per hit. But how do you get golden eggs? By killing boss salmonids. So not only do a lot of boss salmonids have to spawn in and provide you with enough golden eggs to kill the King Salmonid, the boss salmonid will also attack you like it's a normal wave. And don't forget, there are also normal salmonids that will spawn in with the boss salmonids. And then it gives you 100 seconds to complete the task of killing the King Salmonid. I am Executive VP, and the only time I beat an extra wave was when I was an overachiever, a considerably lower rank with easier waves. Now to be fair, even though I am Executive VP, which is the highest level in Splatoon 3 Salmon Run, I don't take Salmon Run seriously or play it consistently. So maybe there are some strategies I'm not taking advantage of. But I also will say that the extra wave is always considerably more difficult than any of the 3 waves that preceded. The reward for participating / beating an extra wave are scales, and the amount of scales you received are based upon the hazard level of your run. The higher level you are, the higher your hazard level is. And this spawns, no pun intended, the main issue that I have with Salmon Run. With the absolute maximum level you can achieve in Salmon Run, upon completing an extra wave, you have a 20% chance of getting a silver fish scale, and a 3% chance of getting a golden fish scale. Let's take my rank, someone who is above average but doesn't put too much time into Salmon Run. I have a 12% chance of getting a silver fish scale on an extra wave, and a fucking 1.8% chance of getting a golden fish scale. So what is the problem? Well, basic rewards, such as locker rewards, cost 5 silverfish scales, something a max level player has a 20% chance of getting, or something they will get once every 5 games they play. Different outfits cost from 10 silver scales each to 30 to 50, 75, 100, and 150. However, you are only eligible to unlock these after already spending a certain amount of scales. The first milestone, which is what spending these prerequisite scales is called, requires you to spend 100 bronze and 10 silver scales. And then the second milestone is spending 350 bronze, 40 silver, and 4 golden scales. Are you serious? And the most atrocious thing in my opinion was the inclusion of Splatoon 2 gear. For those of you who don't know, the same system that is in Splatoon 3 was in Splatoon 2, where every month Nintendo would add a brand new piece of gear, which was unlocked through Salmon Run, and you could then wear it in multiplayer. All of these exclusive items were brought from Splatoon 2 to Splatoon 3. However, in the most stupid ass way conceivable. Somebody over at Nintendo thought it would be a great idea to make the returning gear locked behind bronze, silver, and gold scales, on top of that stupid ass milestone system. You can literally go on Splatoon 2 and unlock one of these gear pieces in like 10 minutes. I'll put money on the fact that as long as Nintendo keeps allowing you to unlock Splatoon 2 gear pieces once a month, that you can unlock all of them in Splatoon 2 starting today faster than you can in Splatoon 3. Let's do a bit more math. To obtain the most expensive gear item Salmon Run has to offer, so far, you'll have to pay 30 golden scales after completing the second milestone. This means that you have to spend a total of 350 bronze, 40 silver, and 4 golden scales, assuming the amount of scales you collected from milestone 1 is transferred to milestone 2. In other words, you wouldn't have to collect 350 bronze scales after already collecting 100 bronze scales. You wouldn't have to collect another 40 silver scales after already collecting 10 silver scales. The most expensive Salmon Run gear item costs 30 golden scales, but you need at least 40 silver scales as a prerequisite to unlock this item. At the very highest level, there's a 20% chance of getting a silver fish scale. But let's take my rank as an example to be grounded in what a higher percentage of players will experience. At my rank, there's a 12.5% chance, or 1 in 8 chance of getting a single silver scale. I've seen people get up to 4 silver scales at once, so let's use that number. So basically, you have a 1 in 8 chance of getting 4 silver scales subtracted by how often you play an extra wave. Let's say 1 in 4 games you play an extra wave. Therefore, your 12.5% chance of getting 4 silver scales is now reduced to 3.1%. In other words, once every 32 games, you will obtain 4 silver scales. Now, you need 40 of these silver scales. That brings our number of 32 games to 320 games to have 40 silver scales. That's 1,040 rounds of Salmon Run, since we are including the extra wave occurring once every 4 games. And with 320 games, with each game taking around 7 minutes, that's a total of 37 hours of Salmon Run just to get 40 silver scales. So now you have your 40 silver scales after 37 hours of doing nothing but play Salmon Run. So let's go get that one outfit. Remember that you have a 3% chance of getting a single golden scale at the very highest level. And this time, it actually is only 1 golden scale. Again, at my level, you have a 1.5% chance of getting 1 of these golden scales upon an extra wave. That means 1 in 65 games, you will get a gold scale, and you get an extra wave 1 every 4 games. That reduces your overall odds of getting a golden scale to a 0.037% chance, or 1 in 266 total games for 1 golden scale. So if you multiply that by 33, since that's the amount of fucking golden scales you need, it'll take you 8,778 games, or 1,024 hours of playtime. Again, given a single game of Salmon Run takes about 7 minutes. 1,024 hours of nothing but Salmon Run. And for the most expensive item in the game that costs 333 golden scales, it will take 88,578 games of Salmon Run, or 10,334 hours of straight Salmon Run. Nintendo, 430 days? Yeah, when I say Nintendo is inexperienced, this is exactly what I mean. No sane human being should be implementing this in their game. For reference, it took me 400 hours or 16 days to find all 900 Korok seeds in Breath of the Wild. An example of an infamously overly demanding challenge besides the Korok seeds from Breath of the Wild is getting Obsidian camo in Modern Warfare 2019. It's reported to take a minimum of 1,275 games. With an average of 7 minutes per Call of Duty match, it will take you a minimum of 148 hours. That's 10,000 hours less than this. Now note that these numbers are to guarantee getting a certain amount of scales based on the percent chance that is in this game. My calculations neglect to consider the other systems in the game that will award you a certain amount of scales on an extra wave, like the amount of damage you deal to the King Salmonid during said extra wave. A more realistic example is Captain Astronaut playing consistently for a year, and when doing the math, put in about 70 hours and received 30 golden scales.
The silver and gold scale drop rates are like predatory gambling booby gotcha game low. I've played Salmon Run consistently for over a year, over 1,700 shifts played, including every big run, defeated over 130 king salmon, fought and lost against even more, and I've gotten a total of 34 golden scales. In a year! It cost 30 golden scales to get a jacket that was free in Splatoon 2!
If we use this number, getting the most expensive item in Splatoon 3 Salmon Run would take 770 hours, which is still almost double the amount of time that I put in to find all 900 Korok seeds in Breath of the Wild, and is 600 hours more than obtaining Obsidian camo in Modern Warfare 2019. The biggest issue that people saw with Big Run is that it holds exclusive rewards for people who fall under 50, 20, and 5% of teams of most collected eggs. This means that there is a large sum of people who will fall beneath the 50%, because if there is a top percentage of something, there also has to be a bottom percentage of that something. Now, You might not believe me based on how much complaining I've done for the past 2 hours. However, I don't really feel passionate about this issue, and that is strictly because of the rewards. You got me fucked up if you think missing out on some stickers and a locker decoration was gonna ruin my day. However, let's say if I was someone who cares about this issue, I think the best solution would make the rewards based on a number instead of a percentage. That way, if you reach a certain number threshold, any percent of players can obtain the reward. In my opinion, overall, Splatoon 3 failed to fix some fundamental flaws from Splatoon 2. One of the big things is the lack of weapon selection. A large percentage of multiplayer weapons are horrible for Salmon Run. Most blasters, exploshers, stringers, most splatlings, dapple dualies, splatanas, and even brushes are, for the most part, noticeably terrible. I'm not saying it's impossible to do well with these weapons in Salmon Run, but damn, it's not easy, especially when you have waves like Rush, which makes all weapons feel 90% more useless than they already are. All of a sudden, you are punished for charging up your splatling, which is, hint hint, something you have to do. Suddenly, you're punished for having to take the time to charge your sniper. If you have a stringer or a splatana, you might as well jump off the map. Same thing with a squeezer or a dynamo roller. I wish Nintendo either allowed us to choose our own weapons or had a pool of maybe 8 or so weapons per rotation that we can choose from. Then we would have that weapon for the entire 3 waves. They could have even tied challenges for certain weapons into Salmon Run. Furthermore, there should have been more complexity with Salmon Run in terms of unlocking player or weapon perks. Maybe unlocking different specials for Salmon Run as you rank up, especially since there are more than 4 available, unlike Splatoon 2 Salmon Run. I think these issues would negate the desire to wait for a better rotation to play Salmon Run sometimes. From what I've heard online and from my own personal experience, there are a variety, and in my opinion, too many factors that play into whether or not a player will enjoy playing a Salmon Run shift. These factors include the map, weapon rotations, particular waves, good enemy spawns, the special one gets, and more. I think Salmon Run Next Wave is a decent enough expansion to Salmon Run from Splatoon 2. It's not unacceptable, and it doesn't feel like Nintendo did the bare minimum with the game mode. They included new bosses, maps, rewards, allowed more specials, more gear, and even included special events like Big Run and extra work. And of course, you can play the game mode 24/7. I also think that Salmon Run has some glaring flaws that should have been addressed. The reward system is way too long-term and forces the player down an egregious grinding process. Half the weapons perform poorly in Salmon Run to the effect that they are undesirable. And personally, I wish some fundamental changes were implemented in Salmon Run, like a perk unlock system or a weapon progression system where your weapons work better upon reaching a certain threshold. I think overall, Splatoon 3 is an excellent game gameplay-wise. It's fundamentally one of the most unique shooters in the genre, which is fleshed out to the extent where a community can and does thrive. The movement, weapon selection, and the strategy that can be involved is what makes the game stand out. The story mode is the best that it has been, with pretty decent and unique missions, cool bosses, and a decent story. The progression and the unlock system was fun to engage with and rewarded the player for exploring and gave the player their own autonomy. The multiplayer is pretty ambitious in certain regards. The updated movement, the new weapons, the new reward system, the massive updates every season all tie into the best Splatoon multiplayer experience. Despite this, there are some things that Nintendo should have gotten down that they didn't, and some things that are in Splatoon 3 that are totally unacceptable. Some simple things like the declining in catalog quality, the weapons not having a lot of different kits, the gear system being player unfriendly, and then there are major things like the awful matchmaking system not prioritizing rank but current performance. The maps don't have too many intricate ways to get in and out of the player and enemy spawn, which makes the game flow less naturally. Although the newer maps seem to be doing alright, so we'll just have to wait it out a bit. The online connection is an absolute joke and is beyond the point of unacceptable, especially from the company providing the service. Splatoon 3 multiplayer is the most expansive game in a series which Nintendo was able to ingeniously implement a concept which they felt was too violent for their brand into something that is unique and also works for them. On a conceptual level, Splatoon 3 is all we could have asked for. But given that this is the 3rd game in the series, there are a multitude of things that Nintendo should have addressed within the game that they have failed to do. Salmon Run makes a decent comeback, although the rewards are hilariously egregious and is also something that shouldn't be entertained by sane human beings. The weapons are half as useful in Salmon Run, making you wonder if it's your teammates that are at fault or if it's the weapon pool. It would have been nice to see some fundamental changes to gameplay, but what we did get was decent enough. New bosses, new maps, new waves, new events, and more make this a pretty acceptable experience. I really wasn't trying to wait until the Side Order DLC came out to make this video, so I might do a separate review on that in a later video. But for now, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Hey, wait, hold on. I'm getting an error. It's an error with my connection. I don't know what's wrong. I think my internet's busted. Hey, what the hell is going on? Nintendo provided Splatoon 3 with 2 waves of downloadable content. The first wave of DLC released in February of 2023, hey, that rhymed, and consisted of an additional hub, which is Inkopolis Plaza from Splatoon 1. You get most of the returning characters from Splatoon 1 that were in the hub. There are returning sound effects and background music from the first game. I think it's pretty cool to revisit this world and have it available on the Nintendo Switch. However, this shouldn't qualify as an entire first wave of DLC. This is very much indicative by the scale of the second wave of DLC. Spoilers, but when you complete the Side Order DLC for the first time, you unlock Inkopolis Square from Splatoon 2. So essentially, Wave 1 had one feature of Splatoon content composing all of the Wave 1 DLC. Wave 2 features content, which is the equivalent of the entirety of Wave 1's DLC, but instead only comprises a fraction of Wave 2's total content. Imagine DLC for a Call of Duty game being in the form of 2 waves. One wave gives you 1 new map, and the second wave gives you 5 new maps, a bunch of new guns, etc. If you can't tell, I'm using Call of Duty as an analogy just to meme at this point. Wave 1, in my opinion, isn't worth half of the price of the expansion pass, nor was getting the expansion pass before the release of Side Order, which is Wave 2. Moving on, Side Order, the Wave 2 DLC, which released a whole ass year later in February of 2024, is a game mode I feel weirdly about. I think it did many things right while messing up in several regards simultaneously. Before we get into my thoughts, I'll give you a quick rundown of the game mode. With some story that, for the life of me, I do not care to go over, you find yourself in the world full of Order. Order is the overarching villain who wants everything to adhere to its ideal world of, well, order. Your job is to climb a tower to free Marina with the aid of Pearl, who takes the form of a robot. This is used as an introduction to the main gameplay gimmick, and once you free Marina, you are sent back down and forced to complete the actual tower. The tower consists of 30 floors, with bosses on the 10th, 20th, and 30th floor respectively. You unlock different palettes or weapon kits as you progress through the boss fights, and using one weapon kit for all 30 floors will allow you to use the corresponding weapon kit in multiplayer, similarly to Splatoon 2 story mode. The rest of the floors are filled with enemies that are new and unique and have different behaviors. Completing each floor gives you a color chip, which will give Pearl a very slight upgrade upon taking on that specific floor. Each floor has an option of 3 missions, most of the time varying in difficulty, and always varying in rewards. Not counting Marina's tower, there are a total of 98 different missions with over 20 different level layouts, if I'm not mistaken about that number specifically. With all of that out of the way, here are some things I think Side Order does right. I think this is an acceptable game mode for a DLC. It's unique enough, comes with a bit of story, and engages the player, meaning you won't be bored while playing this. I think the enemies are cool and unique from what we've previously seen in the series, especially as far as design goes. I like the upgrades that you receive along the way, and I think the currency is given at a rate in which you will have to carefully consider what you buy and how it fits your playstyle. In my previous Many Flaws of Splatoon 2 video, you may or may not recall me criticizing the Octo expansion as it started the trend of exchanging currency to enter levels. In the Octo expansion, you were given more currency if you chose to use what the game thought to be more difficult weapons for said level. However, at no point did I feel as though I needed to step out of my comfort zone in order to yield more currency because I was never at risk of running low on currency. This, however, is not the case with Side Order, which is an improvement to be noted. I think the visuals
stand out, especially with the choice of white and black ink. You also get these cool visual indicators when you gain certain upgrades. I also noticed some subtle sound effects from Splatoon 2, which was really cool to hear. My final praise is that there are lots of unlockables for multiplayer, making it worth your while to play this game mode given that multiplayer is the main attraction of the game. Now, getting into my issues. Although I think the Side Order DLC is a net positive experience, it shoots itself in the foot on several occasions, and it all revolves around the fact that the tower isn't meant for you to clear, for your first couple of tries at least. First off, you're given a grand total of 1 life. 1 life! If you have no armor upgrades, that's as good as making contact with an enemy once. That's falling off the map once. That's 1 mistake, 1 miscalculation. I personally think that the 1 life thing was a stupid way to artificially make the experience more demanding. For one, you're more likely to make a mistake when entering a completely foreign environment that you have never played in before. It makes your success more reliant on previous experience. Those having more previous experience are more likely to succeed and adapt. Sure, you can say this is the case with most things, but I think excuse this concept to a further extent now that your entire run can be ruined based on 1 mistake. The second thing wrong with this is that it takes a decent bit of time to get up the tower. Most missions on the 1st through 10th floor can be beaten in 30 seconds to a minute, but once you hit the higher floors, the fights can draw out from 5 to 10 minutes depending on your luck or lack thereof. I find that it takes around an hour and a half to climb the 30 floors, so when I die on a high floor, I'm not particularly thrilled to have to do it all over again. Especially when in my case, this is only serving as a small break from multiplayer. Luckily, you can buy more lives via hacks, and can even pay to go on another run after all of your lives run out via a different hack. However, these aren't cheap. I find myself having to go up the tower 3 times to floor 17 before having enough currency to buy 2 more lives and a respawn. In more coherent terms, you're gonna have to take another run through the tower before purchasing life insurance, which is my next critique. Although I said that the frequency in which you get currency is good, when mixed with the 1 life per run thing, it puts too much dependence on the hack system. Now, if Nintendo were going for a roguelike or roguelite game mode, which is what they ended up making, then I wouldn't critique this system. But the goal was seemingly to make a replayable and challenging story mode. The execution of both of these goals is questionable. When looking at the challenging aspect of this story mode, I didn't find these missions challenging in the traditional sense. I found the later missions overwhelming, with the objectives being more and more whimsical to ascertain. Maybe whimsical isn't the correct word, more like fucking outlandish. I personally find the destroy the targets and guide the turbine missions a low light. First off, the orbs, assuming you don't have many hacks, have way too much health, regain health, and don't spew enemies consistently on the later floors. They just mindlessly spew out enemies of high tiers while still expecting you to carry out your mission. You might start to get smart and say something like, yeah, that's the point. Well, let me introduce you to the Splatoon paradox. I need to shoot ink to move around. I also need ink to kill enemies. The more enemies you carelessly throw at me, the more ink I'm gonna have to use to maneuver away from them. Thus, the less ink I can spend on completing my objective. It's often that you'll find that you complete your objective by getting a lucky break here and there, rather than developing and using a strategy. I find this especially apparent in any higher floors splat zone mission and turbine mission. The splat zones need to be filled with your ink for upwards of 80 seconds, but then you have unbreakable orbs, spawning enemies constantly that you cannot train. So within a few seconds of having the zone, you're gonna get it taken from you, and there's nothing you can do because the hundreds of enemies are just gonna re-ink the zone while getting to you. And then you're using the ink you should be using to ink the zone to kill the enemies while swimming away from them. All the while, your progress in the zone depletes. I find it taking at least 10 minutes to complete the zone missions on the higher floors, which is ridiculous. The same can be said for the turbine missions. At some angles, which is optimal to push the turbine forward, it will simultaneously leave you vulnerable for enemies to kill you. Meanwhile, there are other angles which the turbine can find itself in that significantly lowers the amount of ink you can shoot at it at a time. And then there are the checkpoints, which turn you from squid to sitting duck. Not even specials can help by much. As for the replay value, the main incentive to replay this mode is to unlock all of the order replica weapons for multiplayer. I just don't see how the incentive shows when the order replica weapons are, like hero weapons from Splatoon 2, reskin kits that already exist in the game. I get that having weapons with different kits locked behind DLC would create an imbalance to a game like Splatoon and would be controversial, but at the same time, I don't think being able to unlock weapons that are already in multiplayer is a good enough reason for replay value. A better way for replay value was making the color chips exclusive for certain weapons. They did make this the case for Side Order, although you can just get most of the color chips while using only one weapon type. Once you get all of the color chips, you can get the Octoshot Replica, a highly sought after weapon, which is why the aforementioned system would have been good for replay value. Also, being able to unlock multiplayer gear is always a good means of replay value. That being said, I wish there was more to unlock, as there are only 4 gear pieces that you can unlock via Side Order. And some quick things. This fucking character doesn't need to be in here. I mean, at all. If you didn't notice, I've been blurring out her name, and I bet none of you even remember it. The enemy description and advice coming from Pearl, Marina, and whoever the fuck this is, has to be unlocked by killing a certain number of said enemies. But the amount of enemies you need to defeat before unlocking all of the advice is so high that by the time you unlock the advice, you're already going to know what to do based on experience. The difficulty in this game has 4 adjectives: easy, normal, hard, and rigorous. But as you climb up floors, they become more and more misleading. What's considered normal on a higher floor is about the same difficulty as what was considered rigorous on a lower floor. What's easy on a higher floor is hard on a lower floor. It would be nice to not be misled and instead just add more different adjectives. The bummy thing is that the rewards for easy challenges on higher floors are about the same for easy challenges on lower floors. So you're getting the same reward for completing objectively harder missions in rare instances. Finally, I think pearls would be a better compensation than membucks for each mission. The only incentive I saw using membucks was to try to buy another 3 lives. The vending machine rewards are just as useful as the color chips, which I'm already stacking by simply playing the missions. So, Side Order provides a unique experience with satisfying rewards, but foregoes proper mission structure in favor of artificial difficulty. A lot of cool and engaging features are included in the game. However, these features are only fruitful due to the One Life feature. The One Life feature automatically forces players to change their approach with the game mode and to lower their expectations of beating it in a timely manner. Furthermore, the features in the game mode live to tactfully counteract the One Life gimmick. I don't think the One Life feature was the main cause of my contention with this game mode, but rather its execution. If pearls weren't so difficult to build up, or if you had the option of playing less strenuous levels on higher floors, if you had the option of choosing the drops, or if the pearl drone weren't upgradable through hacks but rather membucks or something faster, if you automatically obtain your drops instead of having to pick them up off of the ground when it's surrounded by hundreds of enemies at a time, or if color chips were more impactful instead of drip-fed upgrades which can be boosted up to 5 times. I mean, if a single upgrade has the potential to be upgraded 5 times, you know phase 1 of the upgrade is ass. And they're given to you at random and are reset upon a death. Once you do get enough hacks, however, the game just becomes laughably easy, to the point where you see why Nintendo decided to call them hacks. As another YouTuber pointed out, in the case of roguelike games specifically, roguelikes are like having to do reps on a bench press, but every time you fail to hit your rep number, a small amount of weight is removed from the press. Eventually you do hit your number of reps, but was it because you were able to gain the strength to reach your goal? Or was it because there was less and less weight on the bench press every time you failed your attempt? I think Side Order fails to find its sweet spot between fair difficulty and being completely too easy. It's symbolized by the color palette of this game mode, black and white, because there is no middle ground given to you by the game. Instead, you as the player will have to find that middle ground, doing the weird ass low hack 8 palette run for a badge? What? I wish the game mode was actually difficult through thoughtfully placed and designed missions which require you to find a strategy for each mission. Then there wouldn't be as much need for a hack system which, after enough tower attempts, makes your run incredibly easy, because damage up mixed with firing speed is the most overpowered just look at this. So mind you, this is an entire boss fight, okay? And whoever recorded this needs a new capture card. Damn, that quality's ass. But look at that! Oh my gosh! In conclusion, I do think Splatoon 3's expansion pass is worth the price with the inclusion of the Side Order DLC. If you like roguelike games or are looking for a good challenge regardless of the challenge's structure, then you'll love Side Order. I don't know why you would go on Splatoon 3 for a roguelike experience, given all the other game modes are not remotely close to one. Therefore, if you just so happen to like roguelike games, then Side Order is perfect. I even think that it's a good side attraction for the game in general. However, I'm sure you've all heard the saying, it's gonna feel better, but not before it feels worse. I think that saying is the perfect description of Side Order. You might feel completely different, and that's completely valid. But for me, I feel like I saw all I wanted to see out of this game mode once I hit floor 30. Once I get the Octo Shot, I probably won't touch Side Order again. But I will be in Inkopolis Square. I'd put this experience above Splatoon 2 story mode and under Splatoon 3 story mode, as well as underneath the Octo expansion from Splatoon 2. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Sound off in the comment section and enjoy the rest of your day. Leave a thumbs up. Make sure to check out my other videos. I don't only post Splatoon, we post a variety of content over here. But thank you. If you made it this far, please, please, please let me know in the comment section down below. I appreciate you watching and have a great rest of your day.